Hall Hospital. So it was built in 1530 and originally meant for residential use, but served as a hospital for American officers who were injured in World War I. It was used once more as a military hospital during World War II and has been used in a similar capacity ever since, but no more. In the 1980s, it was once again put to private use, but by the 1990s, a significant fire had rendered it uninhabitable. Time for the dark stuff. It's alleged that one of the male owners of the home sexually took advantage of and killed a young girl. Today, her presence has been reported by various people who were in the building. Many people claim to have seen the ghostly image appearing at exactly 4:30 a.m., since she's fond of standing at the end of staff members' beds in the middle of the night. Interesting that she chooses the 4 a.m. hour to appear, since 3 a.m. is usually the preferred time for spirits, since that's when the veil between our world and theirs is the thinnest. So this spirit has been blamed for the disembodied sound of sobbing around the building. The building is also said to have a resident gray lady, but information around her is a lot harder to find, so let me know in the comments if, there's any experts out there, because any ghostie with a missing story is super intriguing to me. In fourth place, we have the Trenton State Hospital, originally known as the New Jersey State Lunatic Asylum, later Trenton State, and now Trenton Psychiatric Hospital. It was the very first one founded on the Kirkbride Plan by activist Dorothea Dix, but it's more remembered for, its medical no-nos instead of its well-intentioned beginnings. Dr. Henry Cotton became the director of the hospital in 1907 and instituted treatments based on his own theories of mental illness. On the one hand, Henry, who had trained at Johns Hopkins under the eminent Swiss-born psychiatrist Adolf Meyer, had a very progressive attitude towards care for his patients. He did away with the mechanical restraints that so many other hospitals use to control patients, introduced occupational therapy, increased the staff, and ensured that the nurses would prevent violence against the patients, and instituted daily staff meetings about patient care. But Henry developed a dangerous theory about mental illness, one that turned his hospital into a house of horrors. After it was confirmed in 1913 that the spirochete that caused syphilis can cause the disease's psychiatric symptoms, Henry began to suspect that all mental illness was caused by bodily infections, and that the only way to cure the patient was to remove the offending infection. In 1917, he began removing his patients' teeth, even in cases where x-rays showed no evidence of infection. Ow! He soon moved on to the other body parts: gallbladder, stomachs, ovaries, testicles, tracts of colon, uteruses. Henry claimed a cure rate of 85%, but in reality his surgeries had an unconsciously high mortality rate, and he didn't always obtain consent from the patients or their family members, and in fact sometimes performed these removals despite their protests. And hey, if that isn't icky enough, he wasn't quiet at all about what he was doing. The crazy doctor published papers and gave presentations on his work. When Meyer, Henry's mentor, sent another psychiatrist to report on the operations at Trenton State, he initially suppressed the report, allowing Henry to continue his gruesome work. He remained at Trenton until 1930, 3 years before his death. Now, the tooth-pulling practice remained in place until 1960, and my mouth hurts thinking about it. Before I get nightmares, time to move on to the fun stuff. As for the ghosts themselves, they are thought to all be those of patients that died within the building, but the most well-known ghost is that of Dr. Henry himself, who has been seen wearing a white doctor's coat and walking down the corridor in the area outside his office. The most commonly reported phenomenon at the hospital is that of disembodied voices, mainly muffled screams and moans coming from distant rooms. Orbs can be caught throughout the building at any time of the day, with some having a strong pale blue glow to them. There are also tales of seeing the ghosts of patients with arms and legs missing, who have been seen in some of the rooms upon, somebody entering them, only to fade away after a few seconds. See, the ghosts of patients I'd love to see, but I feel like seeing Henry would terrify me for a while now that I know, what he did in his lifetime. A lovely example of why to not enable people who do bad things.
Number 5 on this list is the Philadelphia State Hospital. This place is abandoned now, and based on the atrocities that happened here, that's for good reason. All That's Interesting says, in the early 20th century, abuse against patients in these mental asylums was rampant, but few places were as violent as the Philadelphia State Hospital at Byberry, where multiple homicides were later uncovered. The facility opened in 1903 as a working farm for the mentally ill, and patients from other overcrowded mental health hospitals were sent there to heal. But the humble treatment facility quickly became overcrowded itself and was expanded into a multi-campus hospital. In 1919, 2 orderlies confessed to strangling a patient until his eyes popped out and then blamed their actions on PTSD from World War I. Despite their confession, the 2 orderlies were kept on staff and even given a pay raise. And this violence continued for years. In 1989, a groundskeeper stumbled upon the corpses of at least 2 other patients. Violence between patients was just as common. At least one staffer reported witnessing a patient stabbing another patient with a sharpened spoon in 1944. Unethical medical practices were also reportedly carried out in the now abandoned asylum. The pharmaceutical company Smith, Kline and French owned a lab at the hospital where they allegedly conducted questionable testing on patients, likely without their consent. They had people working here who literally murdered one of the patients, and instead of doing anything about it, they just gave them a raise. These were different times back then, folks, and this asylum saw all the bad parts of this era. This murder happened all the way back in 1919, and this hospital kept running like this all the way until 1990. 1990 isn't that long ago, guys. We are only a few decades removed from this horrible institution operating. And the crazy part about all of this is that a place like this is meant to help people. What a joke that ended up being. Number 4 on this list is the Beechworth Asylum. This asylum has definitely been talked about on this channel before in relation to haunted asylums. All That's Interesting says, in October 1867, the sprawling Beechworth Lunatic Asylum was opened in Australia. The facility was built on a hill due to the erroneous belief at the time that high altitude could cleanse patients of their mental illnesses. As was typical of early institutions, the abandoned asylum took in a massive number of patients. At its peak, it housed about 1,200 patients and employed 700 staff members. Also, like most facilities of the 19th century, the treatments at Beechworth were notoriously violent. Doctors subjected patients to straitjackets and shackles. Electroshock treatments were common practice there, so much so that they were reportedly mass shock sessions where nearly the entire patient population was shocked simultaneously. Given the extent of the mistreatment that took place at the asylum, it may not come as a surprise that the facility, which was finally closed in 1995, is said to be extremely haunted. Those who worked at the hospital during its last years alleged that the hauntings began long before the hospital was shuttered. The most famous ghost who's seen these days is Matron Sharp. She was said to watch over the patients as they were shocked by the other nurses and doctors. If you ever saw her coming to your room, then there was a good chance the shock therapy was coming for you next. Now you can sense her due to a dramatic cold presence that fills the room.
In third place, we have the London Asylum for the Insane. So in 1870, London introduced its first asylum, and as one of the first institutions to treat mental illness in Ontario, Canada, it was, revolutionary. Hey, within days, their 500 beds were full. So it was located just outside of the city center, and the asylum initially focused on compassionate care and moral therapy. Their intent was to treat the patient as a whole being, rather than, focusing on a single symptom. Patients would be bettered as members of society, fitting in with the community by keeping steady jobs and following strict social norms, thus, curing their mental illnesses. Now, while conforming to the ideals of conservative society sounds horrid to me, I do understand that at the time, it was probably a safe move. The world is a lot more forgiving now of individuality and understanding of differences, even though we still have a long way to go. So doctors at the asylum also performed several experimental surgeries. In fact, Dr. Richard Maurice Buck, who believed, failed reproductive organs to be the source of mental illness or hysteria in women, executed routine hysterectomies. Moving into the 1930s, shock therapy was introduced to treat symptoms of schizophrenia by inducing seizures. Lobotomies were also completed between 1944 and 1967. While we don't know how many were performed in London specifically, there are about 1,000 between these 23 years across Ontario. One reason that someone would be sent to the asylum includes sexual deviation. What is, shockingly expectant is that body self-love was identified as the root cause of a majority of mental illnesses. So Dr. Buck thought he had remedied this self-harm by inserting a metal wire into the foreskin of a man's penis so that the act would be too painful and uncomfortable. So what this doctor did not know is, that self-love is actually a positive action for sexual health and is not the cause of mental illness, as he would later discover after 11 failed attempts of reversing what he did. What am I forgetting? I feel like there's something I haven't mentioned yet. Oh, right. Ghosts. There was a tree at the main door which was dead and black in color, while vegetation was growing all around it, and that was the tree that patients ended their lives from. The chapel is known to be haunted, with the temperature inside always feeling ice cold, even though it might be sweltering hot outdoors, and the recreation building has also been known to be the home of many unknown ghosts. But the one ghost you want to avoid is that of the bad doctor himself, who passed away on the grounds in February of 1902 when he paused to gaze at the stars one winter's night and lost his balance and, died from the resulting head injury. It's alleged that he was pushed by the ghost of one of his patients who had died from his morbid experimentation, but sadly the mortality rate, like I mentioned before, was so high that we don't know which patient it was. In second place, we have the Topeka State Hospital. So according to the Topeka Capital Journal, a reporter visited the facility at some point during the early 20th century and saw a patient who had been strapped down for so long that his skin had begun to grow over his restraints. So according to my research, this would take many months, if not years, to do so. So I am shuddering. Other patients were chained up, well naked, for months at a time. For many residents at that time, however, life offered a different similar sort of hell, even if they were unrestrained and unending boredom. Patients were given nothing to do, nothing to stimulate their minds, and so they sat in rocking chairs in the hallway all day, rocking and staring and doing nothing else. Thankfully, in 1948, Kansas Governor Frank Carlson, responding to reports of overcrowding and deplorable conditions, convened a panel to, study the problem. The state legislature ended up doubling the appropriations for mental hospitals, and the rocking chairs were removed from the hallway. However, the hospital lost its Medicare and Medicaid accreditation in 1988, and like so many hospitals, lost patients to community-based programs during the 1990s. In 1997, the year I was born, the hospital closed its doors for good. The ghosts that wander what's left of the hospital are those of former patients, which I know, I'm sounding like a broken record. Oh, there's a cemetery on the hospital grounds, which is, the final resting place of patients who died in the hospital. Only 16 of the 1,157 graves have headstones, and most of the souls are left nameless. Visitors to the hospital grounds report seeing orbs and hearing strange moans coming from the cemetery. Yeah, no thank you. In first place, we have Century Manor. So built in 1884 on the outskirts of Hamilton, Ontario, Century Manor was the second major structural component of the Hamilton Asylum for the Insane, an institution initially established for the treatment of alcoholics. Newspaper articles published in the late 19th and early 20th centuries documented at least 9 self-deaths committed in the building, as well as several attempts made by inmates who escaped the hospital. Century Manor was also the scene of several strange accidents and horrific crimes. One female patient fell to her death while attempting to, escape out a window using a rope made from bed sheets, while another had her skull crushed by a falling elevator. One particularly troublesome male inmate was allegedly slugged to death by orderlies, while another split open the head of the asylum's head baker with an axe. No biggie, right? Apparently the living conditions were so bad that in 1910, a former inmate wrote a letter to the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, stating that the place was an outrage to civilization. Allow me to read what he said. Wretched, vile torment is the order of the institutions. He had seen patients pounded, choked insensible time and time again until redness would run from their nostrils. Oh, I haven't even gotten to the most dramatic tale yet. In the early morning hours of August 11th on 1911, a fire mysteriously broke out on the building's top floor. Firefighters who battled the blaze said that 3 of the inmates they rescued from the burning building broke away from them and leapt back into the inferno. When the embers finally cooled, firefighters found 8 bodies amongst the ashes, including a paralytic who had burned to death in his cell, as well as 5 men huddled together in a small room, burnt to a crisp. Now, the historic building shut its doors for good in 1995 and has sat empty ever since, serving as a haunting reminder of Hamilton's dark and tragic history. And now that we've got the history out of the way, time to talk about the ghosties, my favorite part. Underneath the property of Century Manor lies a system of old tunnels. This first-hand account comes from Jeff Cooper, who was hired to guard the entire West 5th property overnight, and on one particular evening, he was making his rounds and ended up underground and inside the tunnels. He made a turn at one of the corners and found himself lost in a hallway with just one wooden door at the end. He heard voices coming from the other side of the door, so he walked up to it, quickly braced himself, took a few deep breaths, and swung the door open. There, sitting at a table in the middle of a small, dirty old room, were 2 women dressed in old-fashioned nurses' uniforms. They both slowly turned and stared at him directly in the eye, until one of them spoke up and calmly said to the other, "See? I told you he'd find us." The security guard was so frightened that he backed out of the room, slammed the door behind him, and caught his breath. He gathered his nerves a second time and slowly opened the door to a completely empty room. The nurses had disappeared from the room, with no other exits being apparent or visible. The ghosts of the men who lost their lives in the fire are also known to roam what's left of the establishment, so if any urban explorers smell smoke while they're there, don't say I didn't warn ya.
Coming in at number 5 we have Ross Island. Located on an island in India closer to Southeast Asia than India, the island is known for beautiful beaches, unique marine life, coral reefs, and largely undisturbed forests. But beyond the island's beautiful views and stunning wildlife lies a dark past. Ross Island is one of the 572 islands that make up the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Now the island is a ghost town where the remnants of a 19th century British settlement lie in ruins. In 1857, reacting to an unanticipated Indian revolt, the British Empire chose remote islands as the site of a penal colony, and Ross Island was one of them. The British first arrived in 1858 with 200 Indian convicts. The deadly task of clearing the thick jungle fell upon the inmates, while the officers stayed on the ships. Moreover, the development and town built at Ross Island began in 1858 and the prisoners were forced to build its buildings. The island was transformed to resemble a British town, with houses, offices, clubhouses, bakeries, stores, churches, and everything else that the British would not miss when they were away from home. The British ruled Ross Island for more than 80 years, up until nature was against the development. In 1941, a gigantic earthquake affected the island and left the town on the island completely ruined. The British thought rebuilding the town would not be worth it and overnight left the island in complete ruins. Abandoned in the 1940s, the island is now being reclaimed by nature. Homes, a massive church, ballrooms, and even a graveyard all are in varying stages of decomposition, being taken over by an unyielding forest. In at number 4 we have Terlingua, Texas. Near the Mexican border, you'll find the town of Terlingua, Texas. In the 1800s, it was discovered that the area in which Terlingua was built was plentiful in cinnabar, a red mercury sulfide, from which mercury can be extracted. This caused an influx of miners to the area, but it wasn't until Jack Dawson's discovery and production of the area's first mercury in 1888 that it drew a population of 2,000, and by 1900 there were 4 mining companies in the area. When the Chiso's mining company opened in the mid-1800s, workers and their families quickly relocated to the Terlingua, Texas. The Chiso's mining company was founded and began operations in 1903 near Terlingua, Texas. The company specialized in the extraction of quicksilver and mercury. In 1799, Charles Harvard discovered that compounding the element produced fulminate mercury crystals, establishing its marketability. These crystals are useful in the production of gunpowder cartridges and shells. Mercury production had peaked during the First World War but began to fall, thus Chiso's mining company had filed for bankruptcy and the miners began to trickle out. When the mine went bankrupt in 1942, Perry sold it and moved away. The population was around 3,000 at its peak, though it said that everyone up and left the municipality in the 1940s once the mercury was picked through. Thus, the once busy city became the ghost town we know today. It is now home to 110 people. By the end of the war, it was an abandoned ghost town. In at number 3 we have Kennecott, Alaska. A once flourishing town with businesses, shops, a train, and a lively community is now left as a ghost town. The town of Kennecott in Alaska was flooded with people after copper was discovered in 1900. After the discovery, a group of wealthy investors formed the Kennecott Copper Corporation to mine the mountains above the Kennecott and Root glaciers. In the 27 years the mine was in full operation, the company and town grew significantly in fortune and people, and at its peak Kennecott employed 600 people. But by 1938 the copper was mostly gone, the mine was shut down and the town was left abandoned. The town was abruptly abandoned by its citizens, leaving most of their possessions behind. Since the middle of the 1950s the place had been completely deserted, with the railroad discontinued service that same year. Reports of ghosts along the abandoned tracks of the Kennecott train have been claimed for decades, while other visitors report having seen old tombstones along the route of the tracks, though the gravestones then vanish by the time the visitors make their return trip. Others have reported hearing disembodied voices and phantom children laughing. Reportedly, a 1990s construction project were halted after workers were scared away by the creepy sounds and unexplainable events.
Number 3. Rolling Hills Asylum. Located in Bethany, New York, Rolling Hills Asylum was established in 1826 as a poor farm or poorhouse, which was an institution built by the government to house and maintain orphans, widowed women, the disabled, the mentally ill, and of course, children. The staff did their best to keep unsafe patients away from the general population, but problems soon ensued. As a result, a solitary confinement cell was constructed in the building, and those who lived there were often referred to as, quote, the inmates. In 2008, Carrie Kearns, the co-founder of ghost hunting Sea Pier, did an overnight public ghost hunt at Rolling Hills. Arriving around 4 p.m., we went to Rolling Hills to get some pictures during the day. The doors opened for the public ghost hunt at 9:30. There were said to be 50 people present during the ghost hunt, and there were 2 tour groups. We used devices such as digital audio recorders, video recorders with night vision, thermometer gauge EMFs, flash cameras, the works. A ghost box and sound amplifier were also present. We did catch some orbs in many pictures, with some being more impressive than others. What appears to be a mist or a smog coming out from behind the nurse's station door scared us. On film, on the 2nd floor, doors of the solarium move on their own. Even shadows of people standing and walking behind the doors appeared. We also caught some EVPs with our digital audio recorders, with a voice of what sounds like an elderly lady screaming, quote, "You, go away." When in the electrotherapy room, I had 2 episodes of sharp pain that lasted approximately 1 minute to the left side of my head and right above my eye. Twice in the electrotherapy room. Around 4 a.m., Mike and I traveled from the area of the organ room down to the 2nd hallway and sat against the sides of the hall. While Mike and I sat there, I began to feel something touch and crawl up my right leg. As that happened, another shadow peeking from around the corner of one of the doors made us super uncomfortable. It was just staring at us. While investigating on the 3rd floor, there were sounds of someone walking around. I felt the touch of a hand touch my face, and a couple seconds later, one of the other investigators further down the hallway said she felt something holding her hands squeezing hard. I wonder what this mist was. Sounds like some Ghostbusters plasma right there. Number 2, Pennhurst Asylum. In October 2019, Ripley's Believe It or Not spent a night at one of the most chilling and gruesome asylums that ever stood. Pennhurst Asylum in Pennsylvania has been called many things. Ghost Ward, the Crazy Kids, and of course, one of the most haunted asylums on Earth. The team spent a night and had this to say about its history and their experiences. Pennhurst's long history of misconduct of children, for example, used punishments such as the removal of children's teeth if they were labeled a biter. The employees' cruelty has been well documented over the years, and is that of Dr. Jesse G. Fear. Literally the worst name for a doctor. Chris Levine, an open-minded skeptic, and Flip Searless, team leader, were just a few of the crew who spent the night with a variety of audio recording devices. Apparently the Echo Vox, which is a tool for investigators, started playing kids jingles. Quote, "We were getting a lot of different children's songs, but the one on repeat was Pop Goes the Weasel. It was pretty terrifying because we heard kids singing along with the Echo Vox in the background." Flip had asked, "Can you see us?" And the children's voice on the spirit box came back and said, "Yes." "How do you see us?" And the kid's voice said, "As ghosts." As we head down into the basement, a prominent ghostly figure is waiting for us. The King. A menacing figure popular with the paranormal enthusiasts who visited Pennhurst over her years. The King was a maintenance worker here from the 40s. His domain? The boiler room. He was not well, and he was known to treat the patients cruelly. He's known to come across on EVPs as a large, shadowy figure creeping around corners, and he'll even touch you. Though they're uncertain if he's a poltergeist or demonic entity, he's come across with a creepy laugh. He told us his name, and the crew even had a full conversation with him. After listening to the Ghost Box recording, the team were nervous when they heard the King yelling, "Leave, leave, leave." We started on the right foot because I offered him a cigarette and asked him if he wanted to smoke. He said yes. Fast forward 10 minutes and he clearly did not want us in that room. He would just repeatedly yell, "Leave." That's horrifying. After asking what would happen if we didn't leave, the King's voice screamed, "Choke." Spooky. Okay. And coming in at number 1, Waverly Hills. Opened in 1910 in Louisville, Kentucky as a 2-story hospital to accommodate 40 to 50 tuberculosis patients, Waverly Hills earns its gruesome history from its tortured patients, ghastly medical experiments, and the infamous body slide, aka body chute, aka the death tunnel, where the dead were transported down and collected at the bottom by a group of staff who would collect them to be cremated or buried. A true ghost tale has featured numerous stories by visitors to Waverly Hills Sanatorium. In one of these cases, an experience was of Mary Lee. She was a young woman who lived in the sanatorium while it was open. On September 10th, 2006, Tom Halstead of Missouri Paranormal Research took a photograph of a ghostly apparition that looked almost exactly like Mary. Some believe Mary is the nurse who hung herself in the haunted room 502, while others believe she contracted tuberculosis herself from a prolonged exposure to patients due to the sounds that they hear. mostly coughs. Whoever this mysterious woman is, she's been captured and feared for decades. Doppelgangers, also known as double walkers, are a type of spirit that mimic the appearance, voice, and mannerisms of anyone it encounters. At Waverly Hills, looking across the room and seeing the exact replica of yourself is pretty common. Even tour guides at Waverly Hills have reported seeing doppelgangers of themselves, and in some cases, the doppelgangers were almost identical except for gaping black holes where the eyes should be. Probably the most famous spirit at Waverly Hills is a little boy known as Timmy. Timmy was around 6 years old when he died in the hospital. Since he died with his whole life ahead of him, his spirit can't move on, and he wanders the hospital in search of life. Visitors often bring toys or bring small balls for him to play with, and many claim that they see the balls bouncing on their own, slamming against the walls, or whipped at high speed down the hallways. One thing's for certain, this place is one of the most haunted.
Number 2 on this list is Danvers Lunatic Asylum. This asylum hosted a very select group, criminals. Thrillist says part prison, part asylum, all terror. This gothic monolith opened in 1878 to house mentally unstable criminals. Thanks to the addition of the mentally handicapped, alcoholics, and plain old felons, it became so severely understaffed by the 1930s that patients' deaths were often not discovered until days later, when they were found rotting in some forgotten corner. Shock therapy and lobotomies were standard procedures. In fact, some call Danvers the birthplace of the prefrontal lobotomy. But a large cemetery on site said to be haunted by evil spirits suggests these were not always successful. The sinister castle-like building is said to have inspired H.P. Lovecraft's Arkham Sanatorium, and so also Batman's Arkham Asylum, and was the setting of Demon Movie Session 9. And as if that weren't enough, Danvers used to be Salem Village. Yeah, of Salem witch trials fame. Regular ghosts are one thing, witch ghosts are another one altogether. Think about how few people would have had to work here, where a literal patient would die and wouldn't be discovered until days later. And also think about what that would have meant for the actual patients. That means that even if you were still alive, you probably wouldn't be treated or seen by a professional for days at a time. Which also means that you might not eat for days at a time either, and be stuck in what I can only assume would have been a cell by yourself for that entire time. This would have been a horrible place to go, even if it was just for criminals. Because of all of this, it is now deeply haunted and a place I highly recommend avoiding. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Waverly Hills Sanatorium. This is an asylum that I've talked about a few times on this channel before, which speaks to how haunted it actually is. Thrillist says, with an alleged 63,000 deaths taking place inside its walls, this place is up to its eyeballs in spirits, not surprisingly topping lists of America's most haunted spots. Originally built as a tuberculosis hospital in 1910, the building saw many die from the disease, but tales of mistreatment and dubious human experimentation trickled out, and patients left the premises in what was known as the death tunnel or body chute. Apparitions including Timmy, a boy who likes to play with rubber balls who's been caught on tape, the nurse who hanged herself in room 502, another nurse who fell from the same room's window, and scattered screams and footsteps have all been seen. 63,000 deaths. And here we were thinking that the 9,000 in the other place was bad, here's 63,000 more. Any place that has a death tunnel and a body chute, that should not be a place meant for rehabilitation and seeking help. We are talking about some sick stuff that went on here. I would get into some of the rumors associated with the human experimentation, but I honestly don't think that YouTube would let this video stay up if I did. There are a plethora of ghostly spirits that haunt this place now. Dark spirits that have lost all sense of humanity and are more demon than spirit. This is a spot that must be avoided at all costs.
In at number 3 we have Thurmond, West Virginia. The historic town of Thurmond, located in the heart of New River Gorge, was established by Captain William D. Thurmond in the 1880s. Captain Thurmond passed in 1910, but the town continued its growth. During its height in the 1920s, the town was flourishing with a number of businesses and facilities in the railway industry. Thurmond had 2 banks, 2 hotels, stores, a cinema, and offices, yet after a series of setbacks, the monsoon went from boom to bust. A number of factors played a role in the town's slow decline. The first problem was the increased rail competition and the emergence of cars. Then in 1930, a fire that led to the closure of the biggest hotel in the town, the Dunglen Hotel, only furthered the decline. The final fate of the town was the Great Depression, and by 1950 Thurmond was a ghost town. Thurmond saw a small revival during World War II when coal was in high demand, but it was not enough. Afterward, the coal fields began to play out. Today, Thurmond stands at just 5-person population, which is why it is nearly vacant ghost town, as the remaining residents either move on or pass away. The house and the land it sits on became the property of the National Park Service. Walking around Thurmond today is a sad reminder of the countless other boom towns which once thrived with human activity, but today are silent and forgotten. Many buildings have long since disappeared, either torn down or, as in the case of the well-loved hotel, burnt to the ground in suspicious circumstances. Many of the family homes lie in increasingly decaying condition, while some have disappeared altogether, leaving only behind a white picket fence and wildflowers which still blossom untended each year. The eerie atmosphere of Thurmond led many visitors to believe that this almost abandoned town is haunted. In at number 2 we have Cahaba Ghost Town. Alabama is home to many small towns. While some of these towns have very few residents, others are true ghost town because they've been completely abandoned. It's no secret that small abandoned towns give off an eerie vibe. As a matter of fact, one Alabama ghost town in particular that fits the bill is Old Cahaba. The small town of Old Cahaba is located in Dallas County. From 1820 to 1826, this small town served as Alabama's first state capital. Before the Civil War, Cahaba was a busy trade city located at the junction of the Alabama and Cahaba rivers. Over the years, floods and decay have affected this historical town. Thus, by 1900, the town was completely abandoned. Today, Old Cahaba is Alabama's most famous ghost town. Many buildings still stand, like the church, schoolhouse, and some houses. However, they have been left untouched for decades. You can still walk the streets of Cahaba and see the ruins and abandoned buildings, but make sure to keep your eyes peeled for the ghostly orbs that have been reported to appear in the garden maze at the home of C.C. Peggs. Additionally, many locals share similar ghost stories from the ghost town. While it's known that Cahaba is filled with paranormal activity, one groundskeeper that works at the new Cahaba cemetery has reported hearing voices as they worked. While tourist groups claim to have recordings of unusual sounds, and others say they've captured unexplained lights or shadows in photographs. Another site that's reportedly haunted is the Barker House. This mansion was built in 1860 by Stephen Barker and contained slave quarters behind the house. After people started leaving the town in 1870s, the house was bought by Samuel McGurdy Kirkpatrick. It burned in 1935 and was rebuilt, but today it's in pretty bad condition. The only people usually left inside are paranormal investigators. Reports from said investigators include seeing a ball rolling across the floor on its own, and a stuffed animal appearing to communicate with something else in the room. But the most well-known haunting in Cahaba is Peggs' ghost. Colonel Christopher Claudius Peggs was the leader of the 5th Alabama Regiment and was wounded leading a charge at the Battle of Seven Pines in Virginia in May 1862. He died from his wounds 2 months later, on July 15th. As the story goes, a couple were walking behind Peggs' home in the spring of 1862. As they walked, they spotted a ball of light. They tried to touch it, but their hands went right through it. It disappeared, but later came back and followed the couple. Due to all the mysterious crimes that happened in association to Peggs, seeing an orb around his former house is considered a bad omen and possibly even a supernatural warning. And finally, in at number 1 we have Centralia, Pennsylvania. Located in a quiet valley of Columbia County, Pennsylvania, is one of the state's least likely and least publicized tourist attractions. Centralia, Pennsylvania once thriving with 14 active coal mines and 2,500 residents in the early 20th century. But by the 1960s, its thriving business and population hit a decline, and most of its mines were abandoned. Still at that point, over 1,000 people still resided in the town, and Centralia was far from dying until a coal mine fire began below. In 1962, a fire started in a landfill and spread to the never-ending coal tunnels that miners dug thousands of feet below the surface. And despite repeated attempts to extinguish the flames, the fire still burns to this day. 20 years after the fire started, however, Centralia, Pennsylvania began to feel the effects of its underground fire, as residents started passing out in their homes from carbon monoxide poisoning. The trees began to die and the ground turned to ash. Roads and sidewalks began to buckle. But some residents didn't want to leave despite the health risks, and for the next 10 years, legal battles and personal arguments between neighbors became the norm. The local newspaper even published a weekly list of who was leaving. Finally, Pennsylvania invoked eminent domain in 1993, by which point only 63 residents remained. Officially, they became squatters in houses they had owned for decades. In 2013, the remaining residents, which were fewer than 10, won a settlement against the state. Each was awarded $349,500 and ownership of their properties until they die, at which point Pennsylvania will seize the land and finally demolish what structures remain. In at number 4 we have Rhyolite, Nevada. Founded in 1904 and abandoned by 1916, Rhyolite was one of several short-lived boom towns from the late gold rush era. People were drawn to the desert on the edge of Death Valley by the promise of gold found amongst quartz in local mines. And by 1906 the town had all the promising indicators of permanence and the largest population in the area. The town's citizens had an active social life, including baseball games, dances, basket socials, whist parties, tennis, a symphony, Sunday school picnics, basketball games, Saturday night variety shows at the Opera House, and pool tournaments. In 1906, Countess Majowski opened the Alaska Glacier Ice Cream Parlor to the delight of the local citizenry. That same year, an enterprising miner, Tom T. Kelly, built a bottle house out of 50,000 beer and liquor bottles. But in 1907, the US financial markets were rocked by panic that saw closures of banks, businesses, and mines. Rhyolite began to falter. The mine closed in 1911. Some claim that Rhyolite, about 120 miles northwest of Las Vegas, was once home to thousands of people, though not much remains of its glory days, which lasted less than 20 years. Set up in 1905, the town was a mining hotspot, but after the richest ore was exhausted, workers left for a new pasture and the population had dropped to close to zero by 1920. Industrialist Charles M. Schwab invested heavily in Rhyolite's infrastructure, which boasted a school, electric lights, water mains, newspapers, a hospital, and even an opera house, some of which can be seen today. There are only around 10 significant structures, yet the site is very evocative. The crumbling remains set against a backdrop of stark desert hills. In at number 3 we have Jazirat Al Hamra, which is best known as the ghost town of the United Arab Emirates, is said to be the country's most haunted place, remaining a number of spooky events experienced by the locals and curious visitors. Jazirat Al Hamra is an abandoned village located to the south of the city of Ras Al Khaimah, one of the 7 emirates that form the UAE. The coastal territory is the region's best example of a pre-oil village, displaying 3 distinct types of early and mid-20th century Gulf architecture. The town of Ras Al Khaimah is the crumbling remains of a once thriving fishing village. The name translates to Red Island for the red and bronze color of the sand on which the town was built. The former tidal island was predominantly home to the Zab tribe, who by 1831 developed the area into a renowned pearling trade center. It was home to over 4,000 inhabitants and dozens of fishing and trading ships, and with its good fortune came expansion that continued well into the start of the 20th century. But by 1968, Al Jazirat Al Hamra became nothing more than an abandoned town. Due to a clash between the tribe and Sheikh Saka bin Mohammed of Ras Al Khaimah due to some unclear reasons, thus most of them migrated to Abu Dhabi. The village consisted of 334 buildings including 18 shops and 11 mosques, and is nearly unchanged since its people left in 1968. Al Jazirat Al Hamra, now filled-in patch of land in the south of Ras Al Khaimah, remained abandoned and untouched. However, rumor has it that this extraordinary quiet and silent village is extremely haunted by the jinns. People even gossip that they can hear the strange noise and disembodied voices near the beach of this ghost village. Many visitors also assert that they felt uneasy, like danger was lurking, waiting for them when they pressed on further into the haunted village. Some of them even claimed to have reported seeing unexplainable handprints on the ruined pillars and walls and experienced many more paranormal things within this haunted ghost town. In at number 2 we have Pyramiden, Norway. Some say that the Soviet town of Pyramiden, Norway was abandoned overnight and for a good reason. Located in Svalbard, an archipelago situated between Norway and the North Pole, Pyramiden can be reached by boat from about mid-May until the beginning of October, when waters bordering the town are free from sea ice. Established in the 17th century, the town was used as a base for whaling and walrus trapping. Though at the start of the 20th century the culture shifted to coal mining. At first Pyramiden was a sleepy place with hardly any residents at all, but after World War II the Soviets allocated more money to the town. They constructed dozens of new buildings, including a hospital, a recreation centre called the Cultural Palace, and a large cafeteria. In the 1980s the town's population reached its peak of more than 1,000 people, but not long due to the wake of the Soviet Union's dissolution the town would be left completely abandoned. As when the Soviet Union fell apart, mining stopped in Pyramiden and the miners had to leave. On March 31st, 1998, the last coal was extracted from the mine, and the approximately 300 workers who still lived there began shipping out. The residents never returned, and today the town still stands much as it was when the last men departed.
Number 2. Varosha, Cyprus. Coming up next on our list is going to be Varosha in Cyprus. Once a shining playground for the glitzy and glamorous, this paradisal resort in the Mediterranean was a popular spot for the celebrities of yesteryear in the 1970s to get away from it all and put their feet up and stop worrying about the daily stresses of having a lot of money and being a movie star. That kind of lifestyle's taxing. The suburbs enjoyed a thriving tourist economy, with the golden sands and beachfront hotels being a force in enticing people to come. Of course, fame is fleeting and nothing in this world lasts forever, like celebrity resort towns. In 1974, Turkey would invade Cyprus and occupy the north in a response to a Greek nationalist-led coup. So the 15,000 people that lived in Varosha all up and fled the city in terror, leaving everything behind as it stood. Unfortunately, years of political strife and controversies in the area kept Varosha's residents from ever returning to their homes, leaving the city to rot in open air and decompose into a wasteland. One look at Varosha and it just seems like a tragic waste, trying to wrap your head around the money, livelihoods, industry, all just lost forever. It's a very eerie feeling looking at the photos of Varosha, seeing the earth try to take the city back. Buildings crumbling, trees sprouting through the bottom floors of cafes and restaurants. Well, why not just go in, fix the place up a little, sweep up, clean it? Well, decades of neglect have done inconceivable damage to the infrastructure. The city has crumbled and wasted away so much that experts estimate that it would take upwards of $12 billion to make the decrepit city livable once again. So for the time being, it'll probably remain as a time capsule, frozen from better years where things were bright for this forgotten city. Number 1. Oradour-sur-Glane. Our final entry for this list today is going to be the somber story of the village of Oradour-sur-Glane, an abandoned town in France, infamous for being host to one of the worst massacres in French history during the Second World War. It's believed that the attack was an act of revenge because of the village's support of the resistance. So as retaliation, German soldiers rounded up 642 residents and killed them, and burned the houses to the ground. Some were fired at, while others were locked in a church that was burned. The only people from the village who managed to survive the horror were those that played possum and fled out into surrounding forests after the invading soldiers had all left. After the war had ended, nearby there was a new Oradour-sur-Glane built nearby, but the original village, what's left of it at least, was ordered to be left untouched by President Charles de Gaulle, who insisted the village must be left standing as a monument to honor the dead who had been wrongfully taken too early. So, not quite a ghost town in the sense that there's stories of hauntings or chills through the night, but haunting in a certain sense, definitely.
Number 3 on this list is the Riverview Hospital. This hospital is located in British Columbia and was still operating and doing some horrible practices way longer than anyone would care to admit. It was first built in the early 1900s in a less populated part of BC. It had almost 250 acres of land to itself and a bunch of different buildings that served various purposes. There was one building called the West Lawn Pavilion, which actually was said to house the most disturbed male patients in the whole country. This part of the hospital eventually shut down in 1983, but the rest of the place, where a bunch of questionable practices were going down, that didn't shut down until 2010. That's right, guys, 2010. Literally only 12 years ago, this place was still operating. Reports revealed that the hospital still employed electroshock therapy in the 21st century and allegedly illegally sterilized a number of patients. In 2005, 9 women received settlements totaling $450,000 following a joint lawsuit filed against the facility over the alleged sterilizations. As much as I want so badly to believe that we are out of this era of poor mental health, we might not fully be. That happened just over a decade ago. If you were sent to this place only a few years prior, then you may have had to deal with this. Kinda makes you wonder how many other places around the world are still conducting horrible treatments that we don't know about. Number 2 on this list is the Ospedale Psychiatrico di Volterra. This abandoned lunatic asylum is located in Italy. All That's Interesting says the asylum at Volterra was meant to be a sort of haven where patients could roam and do as they pleased. There were shops, a gardening company, and a judicial section which became known as the Fairy Pavilion. But the hospital's idyllic objective was sidelined after the facility became overcrowded. By the 1960s, the Ospedale Psychiatrico di Volterra was one of the country's most populated hospitals with more than 6,000 patients. This was largely due to how easy it was to be committed to the hospital, and patients were admitted on the faintest signs of depression to accusations of moral transgressions. The facility was run like a prison, with nurses being referred to as guards or supervisors. Patients were treated like inmates and often sedated or isolated. The cures they were given included electroshock treatments, insulin-induced comas, and ice tank submersions. Patients at the Volterra facility suffered immensely until the hospital was abandoned in 1978 following the passage of the Bassaglia Law, which mandated the closure of all mental hospitals in Italy. I didn't even know that ice tank submersions or insulin-induced comas were a real thing. Like, I just thought stuff like that existed in shows like Stranger Things, but that actually happened. Last I checked, an insulin-induced coma isn't gonna help anyone with schizophrenia. Number 1 on this list is the Willard Asylum. Once again, guys, we have an asylum who initially wanted to help people but ended up doing the exact opposite. All That's Interesting says Willard was a state-of-the-art facility that featured a gymnasium, arts and craft classes, a movie theater, and even a bowling alley. It was meant to be a place where people living with mental illnesses could either devote themselves to their recovery or live in a safe and active environment. One of the hospital's main missions was to treat patients with the goal of preparing them to rejoin society. Despite this ideal, the hospital fell victim to the incomplete ideas and harsh treatments of its day. Patients were still subjected to electroshock therapy and ice baths, and some patients were kept at the asylum until their deaths. Many were buried under unmarked tombstones that still dot the abandoned asylum's grounds. The hospital was finally shut down in 1995. Perhaps most tragic about the asylum's history, however, was the discovery of hundreds of suitcases that were found cataloged in the hospital's attic upon its closure. These were the belongings of patients who died in the hospital and were unclaimed by next of kin. The staff was apparently unable to throw these mementos away. Hundreds of suitcases, guys. Not 1 or 2 or 10, hundreds. That's hundreds of people who died here and were put in unmarked graves. Hundreds of people who died here and whose families either didn't care enough about them to go claim their belongings or were never informed that they died. I'm so happy that times have changed and the stigma around mental health and its treatment is lifting. 100 years ago, the last thing you would have wanted is to have someone try and help you with whatever it is that you're dealing with. Number 5 on this list is the Rolling Hills Asylum. Located in East Bethany, New York, this asylum will suck you in and never let you out. Thrillist says, more a stockpile of outcasts, the poor, the widowed, the orphaned, the handicapped, the criminal, the alcoholic, than an insane asylum per se. The former Genesee County poorhouse, established in 1827, counts over 1,700 documented deaths. Some are convinced that's a lowball number, and hundreds more were buried on the property in unmarked graves. Paranormal activity in the 53,000 square foot building includes screaming, doors slamming, and apparitions, most famously of Roy Cruz, a 7.5-foot giant who died there in 1942. There's also something known as the Shadow Hallway, so named because of the shadowy apparitions that peek out from doors or shuffle and crawl across the corridor. A variety of ghost tours are available. These shadow creatures, the ones that pass through the shadow hallways, they apparently aren't the friendliest of creatures from what I've heard. Lots of people who have gone into this place never make it out again. It's thought that this is the work of the shadow creatures here. Then the person who is sucked in by those creatures becomes one of the shadow creatures there as well. meaning that this asylum is slowly growing in its sinister and evil presence. Who was the initial shadow creature and why these beings have manifested here is unknown. All we know now is that they are here and they are here to stay, which ultimately means that you need to stay away. Number 4 on this list is Narrenturm. So this is a weird and unique one for sure. It actually isn't an asylum anymore, and it's also not abandoned, which makes it pretty unique for a list like this. Currently, it actually serves as a museum, believe it or not. Thrillist says it's unclear what's worse, the surely morbid history that took place in Vienna's Fool Tower, Europe's first insane asylum built in 1784, or its current use, the Anatomical Pathological Museum, which features more than 4,000 graphic, gruesome abnormalities, jars full of deformed fetuses, and sickening wax models of untreated STDs. Either way, there's enough nightmare fuel in this place to last you until next Halloween. Nightmare fuel is an excellent way to describe this place. It's messed up for sure, guys. I don't know if you're going to get into a position where you won't be able to leave this place, but you definitely will be feeling weird for sure based on what you're looking at. Untreated STDs and deformed fetuses. No thank you. Not to mention this place might actually be haunted. This was the first insane asylum ever in Europe, guys. Just think about what the conditions would have been like. Conditions in mental hospitals today are still not super ideal, but back then you would have been treated horribly. Back then they would have treated you worse than a criminal and probably tortured you until you couldn't take it anymore. There are reports from olden asylums where they would just shove people into tiny little boxes and keep them there for days. Obviously, the people who had to go through this, their spirits have never been able to rest or find peace. So along with the STDs, you might also get haunted as well. Great place this is. Number 3 on this list is Lier, Sykehus. With a name like that, you can just assume that it's going to be haunted. Thrillist says about a half hour from Oslo, this asylum was opened in 1926 and today is considered one of the most haunted hotspots in the country. Despite its reputation and the fact that most of the place has been abandoned since 1985, parts of it still house psychiatric patients who share their space with ghosts, shadows, and odd noises. Between 1945 and 1974, the hospital was notorious for conducting experiments on its patients, especially the testing of new drugs that even the pharmaceutical industry was hesitant to try on humans. I don't know where and when people thought that testing already mentally sick people with questionable drugs was a good idea. It seems like this is something that happened a ton in history, and I have no idea how anyone thought this was a good idea. Like, first off, they're already sick and going through something, so it just doesn't make sense how feeding them something that we know nothing about is going to give the desired result. The people who used to do this had to know it was wrong because the patients at this hospital weren't really given any choice in the matter. They were forced to go through these experiments, which often resulted in permanent damage to their bodies, if not death. Those who had to go here from the 40s to the 70s literally could not leave. They were stuck here, and they just had to pray that they didn't get the worst of the experiments. Thank your lucky stars that you didn't have to go to this place during this time, or you would never be able to get out. Number 5 on this list is the Beechworth Lunatic Asylum. Located in Australia, this is one of the most haunted asylums in the entire world. Thrillist says, formerly the Mayday Hills Lunatic Asylum, now La Trobe University's scenic Beechworth campus, this place saw 128 years of terror before closing in 1995. Apparently 9,000 patients died here over the years, and people were so fast and loose with the term lunatic that few patients ever left the premises alive. It comes as no surprise that a few people lingered after death. Faces floating in windows are a common sight, along with Matron Sharp doing her rounds and children laughing. Tommy Kennedy, who used to transport the dead out of the asylum and died there himself, still hangs around. There's also a woman who was thrown out of a window and died in front of the hospital because she was Jewish and the only person allowed to move her, a rabbi, couldn't make it to Beechworth sooner. Yeah, so clearly this place has seen its fair share of trauma throughout the years, folks. 9,000 people is a lot of people who've died. Like, we're talking about a small town's worth of human beings who died at this freaking asylum. And as exampled by that poor Jewish woman, these deaths weren't all from natural causes either. There was said to be some sick workers here, people who were twisted and got off on hurting others, people who worked at the asylum but probably would have been better suited to be in it themselves. Asylums in general are already susceptible to haunting considering what's going on, but when you have this amount of death and atrocities take place, it just makes it that much easier for ghosts and paranormal entities to cling on. Many of the locals don't even come close to this place anymore, and a lot of the tourists who do go here thoroughly regret that decision soon afterwards. These entities are angry and want to punish those who are living for what happened way back then. I don't recommend being one of the people who gets punished. Number 4 on this list is the Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital. If you had a mental illness, then I promise you this is not where you wanted to end up. Thrillist says, believed to be one of the most haunted spots in South Korea, this abandoned psych hospital could be the basis for the next Stephen King novel based on its checkered history. According to local lore, patients here began dying mysterious deaths one after the other, forcing the facility to shut down. Many believe the murderous owners of the place was to blame, claiming that he kept patients as hostages only to flee to the States when families of the deceased demanded explanations. There are also rumors of doctors going insane, rivaling their patients in madness. So literally folks, if you ended up here, then there was a pretty good chance that not only did you not get the help that you needed, but you also just died. Whether this was because of the sick owners or the doctors, who even knows? That much death has left behind its mark though, and now this place looks like a safe haven for ghosts and everything paranormal. There's also been talk of a creature that lurks here, a creature that was actually the cause of all this death to begin with and is lurking, waiting for somebody to stop by and take them next. If I was you, I wouldn't want to be that person. Number 3 on this list is the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. This is a scary masterpiece, folks. Thrillist says, this impressive structure, allegedly the world's second largest hand-cut stone masonry building after the Kremlin, looks like it was designed as the set of a blockbuster thriller. Built around the Civil War era, the asylum was designed to house around 250 patients, but ended up holding more than 2,400, including for a brief period, the infamous Charles Manson. That's the opposite of a celebrity endorsement. Along with severe overcrowding, profound abuse abounded. People were locked in cages, lobotomized with ice picks, chained to things, and the combination led to hundreds of deaths and a palpable air of suffering. Apparitions are aplenty, like the still deranged patient Ruth who likes to attack visitors. And since the asylum was also briefly a Civil War military base, uniformed soldier ghosts roam the halls. Thousands have claimed to hear voices telling them to get out. Civil War themed ghost tours, tours of the medical center, forensic buildings and geriatrics buildings, and zombie events and balls fully play up the twisted history on the campus grounds. Now, don't get me wrong, would it be really fun to be part of a zombie event at this place? Yeah, absolutely. But I'm also not trying to get attacked by Ruth, the deranged ghost patient. Whenever people travel to a place like this, there is a risk involved. I personally am not willing to take the risk based on the history that this place has seen. Comment down below if you would.
Number 4, Danvers State Hospital. Located about 21 miles north of Boston, the hospital opened on May 1st, 1878, and the hospital's first patients arrived only days later. The inspiration for H.P. Lovecraft and Batman's Arkham Asylum due to its gothic look and its twisted patients. This asylum followed in the same footsteps of any classic mental asylum. It was only meant for about 500 patients, but ended up housing around 2,500. Low staff, no rooms, and of course treatments such as shock therapy and lobotomies. This asylum was the very first to operate the transorbital lobotomy, where an ice pick is inserted through the eye socket and into the brain. Ouch. The staff started to experiment with this new method on the elderly, mentally disabled, alcoholics, drug addicts, and insane criminals. The staff used treatments like shock therapy and lobotomies even when they didn't need to. Of course, due to the extreme methods of controlling patients and the push for science, patients started dying there, and their bodies were found days and months later. The cruelty just began. The doctors were using lobotomies to cure anything from daydreaming and backaches to delusions and depression. Visitors described how dirty the patients always looked, how they were creepily wandering the halls and sometimes even blankly staring off into space. Some of these patients weren't even suffering from anything, and the extremes of the treatments are what drove them insane. The asylum was of course shut down and its building demolished. Some patients left the asylum while others are spending eternity under its grounds. The asylum's buildings don't exist anymore, but its cemetery does. Danvers State Hospital closed on June 24, 1992 due to budget cuts within the mental health system. And the 770 patients who died at Danvers were buried in the numbered lots on the property, with the hospital replacing traditional headstones with patient numbers. This is just one act of cruelty and dehumanization the hospital was known for.
In at number 2 we have Exunatunic Belize. I hope that's how you say it. Deep in the jungle of Belize lies an ancient ruins of an abandoned town that has been left to crumble. The town has been left abandoned for over 1,000 years, though before the abandonment of this large and populated town, Exunatunic was a thriving metropolis. The first construction at the site dates back to sometime in 200 AD, with the growth of the town continuing until its final days of functioning as a city. The town grew to consist of many temples and palaces, including its largest and most recognizable, known as El Castillo. Exunatunic has lied abandoned since around 1000 AD. It is thought that due to consistent devastating events such as an earthquake and other natural disasters, caused a sudden evacuation of the large Mayan city around 700 AD. The disaster caused extensive damage to the main pyramid of Exunatunic. Although the city was reoccupied sometime after, it only remained active for another 300 years before it was left completely unoccupied. After abandonment, the site remained empty, eventually being encapsulated by the surrounding jungle and nature, until it was rediscovered by explorers in the early 1890s. The name Exunatunic comes from the ghost stories that have haunted the ghost town for years. The ghost story of Exunatunic is rumored to start in 1893, after the first sighting of the ghost happened. The first ghost sighting goes as one morning a man who was part of a research team working on the site saw what he described as a Mayan maiden ascending the staircase of the Exunatunic's main pyramid. This vision caught him by surprise, so he continued to watch as the woman walked further up the stairs. Suddenly she stopped and turned to look at the man, where he was able to get a glimpse of her glowing red eyes that pierced his soul. She then turned to continue her climb to the top of the pyramid, where she would disappear amongst its stone columns. The shocked man quickly assembled a team to search for this woman, yet no trace of her was ever found. Since this sighting, countless more visitors have reported to also spot the ghostly maiden who haunts Exunatunic. She is always described to be ascending El Castillo's stairs. To this day, the sightings and reports from visitors continue. The ghost frequency is what gives Exunatunic its name, which translates to the Stone Lady in the Mayan language. Some believe that this Mayan maiden have formerly lived within the city many years ago. Others believe that she was a human sacrifice, trapped to relive her last moments of ascending to the top of the pyramid where her ritual would have been conducted. Then there are a few who believe her to be some sort of ancient godly spirit linked to the site and the Mayan culture. And finally, in at number 1 we have Calico, California. The ghost town of Calico can be found in California, midway between Barstow and Yermo. The beginning of the town started in 1875 and was built under the impression that there were prospects for silver in the Calico Mountains. But in the spring of 1883, many of the local miners left Calico when borax was discovered 3 miles east at Borate. Though Calico again boomed in 1884 as additional silver discoveries were made. Gaining a population of some 2,500, the town supported 24 saloons and gambling dives that never closed, as well as more establishments such as the church, public school, dance school and a literary society, along with dozens of retail businesses. By the late 1800s, Calico was bustling with prospectors searching for their fortunes, and the Calico mining district became one of the richest in the state. Calico's final decline began when the price of silver fell in the 1890s, but the break production kept it alive, even through the panic of 1906. They tried to hold on, and borax for a time substituted for the shiny metal that had been Calico's fortune. Calico kept churning out valuable minerals until it finally exhausted its supply in the 1920s. Calico was soon abandoned and left to gradually decay in the desert sun until little remained, but in 1951 it was purchased by the Walter Knott, an ex-miner, and rebuilt as a modern ghost town. He restored the town to mostly how it was, in certain cases rebuilding some of the old structures as they were back in the 1880s. Considered one of the top haunted locations in California, Calico has its fair share of ghost stories, when one of the most active and known ghosts of the abandoned town is Lucy Lane. Lucy is often seen in a black lace dress walking back and forth between her home and store. Others have allegedly seen phantom school teachers and other residents who have been known to grab visitors' legs or pinch their ankles. Some visitors have also reported seeing a floating red light inside the buildings, while other visitors have reported extreme cold spots throughout the mine and an eerie feeling in various places of the town. Coming in at number 5, we have Grafton, Utah. Located just a few miles away from Zion National Park in Utah, the now abandoned town of Grafton can be found. The town was originally established in 1859 when 5 Mormon families nearby were led to establish a town they called Wheeler to plant cotton, which would have been a profitable commodity during the Civil War. After only 2 years, the town was struck by a massive flood starting on January 8th of 1862 that washed away the entire town. However, the pioneers did not give up that easily and moved about a mile upstream and founded a new town named Grafton. They grew cotton, alfalfa and wheat, but life was harsh and many residents lost their life due to the diseases and various accidents. The mortality rate was also extremely high, which accounts for about 77 total graves in the nearby cemetery. The town flourished for a while despite recurring floods, with a church and adobe schoolhouse being built in 1886, but when the Hurricane Canal was built in 1906, many families started to move to Rockville and Hurricane, and by 1920 only 3 families remained in the town, and in 1944 the town's last residents, Frank Russell and his wife Ellen, moved as well. And although the town is now well maintained by the non-profit volunteer organisation of the Grafton Heritage Partnership Project, its dark past can still be felt when exploring the area. People have reported hearing ghostly footsteps over the creaky floors in the empty buildings, as well as the breath of ghostly souls on the back of their necks. The entire town gives visitors a feeling as if being watched, and the shadowy figures can sometimes be spotted in the windows. Another visitor of the ghost town visited the basement of the Russell home and claimed that they found a chair sitting in the middle of the basement with a mark on it as if someone had recently sat on it. They had been exploring for over an hour at this point and had not encountered another person on the way to town or the entire time they were there, but for some reason the print looked brand new, with not a single speck of dust on it. After filming for a few moments in the basement and recording into the silence, they felt a rush of air, as if someone had just walked past them, which scared them, and they decided it was time to leave. There are even rumours of skinwalkers lurking in the area. Even the cemetery itself has many reports of people hearing crying, laughing and chilling screams, especially late in the day and when it's overcast. Some people have even seen a woman in a dress with her hair in a bun walking around the cemetery sobbing, but when they approached her she disappeared into thin air. There is no doubt that there is definitely a very uncomfortable feeling while walking around the gravestones, which isn't surprising knowing the sad history of the people laid to rest there. In at number 4 we have Deadwood, South Dakota. The town of Deadwood is located in South Dakota and gained attraction in the gold rush of 1876. In 1875, a miner named John B. Pearson found gold in a narrow canyon in these northern Black Hills. This canyon became known as Deadwood Gulch because of many dead trees that lined the canyon walls at the time. Practically overnight, the tiny gold camp boomed into a town that played by its own rules that attracted outlaws, gamblers and gunslingers along with gold seekers. At its height, the city had a population of 5,000, attracting larger-than-life Old West figures back then. The business district comprised largely of saloons, dance halls, card parlors and bodacious bordellos. They were all hungry for gold and did whatever they had to in order to get some. The business did whatever they could to serve the gold diggers, and sometimes that led to a little bit of conflict. Because of this, the now ghost town still lives with stories of its dead residents haunting present-day hotels and saloons. In 1876, Deadwood survived a smallpox epidemic that nearly wiped out the whole town. There were so many infected that multiple tents were erected to quarantine the stricken. In addition, it suffered 3 major fires. One devastating fire occurred on September 26, 1879, destroying more than 300 buildings and consuming the belongings of many inhabitants. Many numerous economic hardships also followed, pushing it to the verge of becoming another Old West ghost town. One of the most paranormally active sites in the ghost town is the Adam House. Built in 1892 after owner W.E. Adams had a stroke on the premises, his wife was so disturbed by the sounds of his ghost still walking around, rocking the rocking chairs and so forth, that she moved and left the house untouched, exactly as it was when he died. Now visitors and employees report having seen a rocking chair rock on its own, encountered a shadowy man standing at an upstairs window, and heard voices and footsteps in rooms throughout the house. In at number 3 we have Garnet, Montana. Found in Montana, the abandoned town of Garnet was another gold rush town that drew thousands of hopeful miners. Between 1862 and 1916, gold was mined from the area. During the peak of the town, it had hotels, saloons, schools, and stores in the midst of the town's biggest years. A 1912 fire burned down half of the town, and what was lost was not rebuilt. Many of the remaining structures were in poor condition even when they were lived in and regularly visited. This marked the decline of the town, as after 1917 the mine began to offer less and less, and by the time of World War I the town was almost fully abandoned. Garnet is perhaps the best preserved coast town in the state of Montana. There are plenty of people who believe the abandoned buildings are still home to some of the residents who once lived there. Some visitors have reported hearing laughter and music coming from Kelly's Saloon, which is the most common occurrence. I quote, "We didn't experience anything bordering on the supernatural during our visit, but we did find the beautifully preserved artifacts to be windows into Garnet's incredible past."
Number 3 on this list is Deception Island in Antarctica. Deception Island can be found just off the northwest Antarctic peninsula in the South Shetland Islands. The island itself is quite remote and can only be reached by ship. The island was once known for being the safest harbor in Antarctica and used as a sealing and whaling station, having interested Britain, Chile, and Argentina for a place of science and military, where Britain ended up using it as a military base, but not for long, as it was deserted when volcanic activity destroyed it in 1960. Today, Deception Island is a popular Antarctic tourism destination and a scientific outpost for summer research teams from Spain and Argentina. With a history rich in destruction and conflict, the horseshoe-shaped landmass can leave visitors with more than a touch of nostalgia and even the uneasy feeling that the island is true to its name, that something here is not as it seems. Since it's been abandoned, the island is known to be a paranormal active hotspot, as many of the ghosts of Deception Island are plain to see, with abandoned scientific research stations, airplane hangars, whaling operations, and military bases being scattered around the island. Many who have visited Deception Island have said they felt uncomfortable, as though they're not alone in more ways than one, with many visitors having heard strange voices seemingly coming out of nowhere. Others claim to have seen shadowy figures. Strange orbs of light are commonly seen there as well, only adding to the mystery and intrigue of such a place. With no immediate way to escape the island, making the risks of visiting the island and interacting with paranormal activity a little scarier. Number 4 on this list is Krakow, Italy. Even though the residents of Krakow, Italy are long gone, the town on the hill remains abandoned. Located atop a 1,300-foot cliff overlooking the river valley below, the town was founded in the 8th century. Krakow is only 40 kilometers inland from the Gulf of Taranto and a part of Italy's Basilicata region. The first written evidence of the town's existence shows that it was under the possession of a bishop named Arnaldo in 1060 AD. The town's oldest building, the tall Tor Normana, predates the bishop's documented ownership by 20 years. The city emptied due to various natural disasters. In 1963, the people of Krakow, Italy saw its first substantial landslide, though life went on and the town kept on expanding. Then another tragedy hit. In 1656, the Black Death began to spread, where hundreds died and the population dipped. Though the town lived on, in 1972 a flood made conditions even more precarious. Despite living conditions being harsh and dangerous, as well as numerous bandit raids, there were still many residents who refused to leave their beautiful city. Though in 1980 an earthquake caused the town to be abandoned in its entirety. Now Krakow is effectively a ghost town, reduced to nothing but ancient ruins for half a century. It's an eerie look at a once thriving village that's now known as a ghost town. The oldest part of Krakow, built on solid bedrock, still remains standing. As beautiful as Krakow is, the land and location have proven not suitable for habitation. From its rich tragic history and frozen in time as a medieval town, it's only safe to assume that the town is haunted by its past.
In at number 5 we have Batstow Village in New Jersey. Located in New Jersey, Batstow Village is a historic community centered around the Batstow Iron Works. The site was ideal for ironwork because there was water for mills, abundant wood for charcoal, and naturally occurring bog iron. The well-preserved and lovingly restored village dates back to 1766. As the operation of ironwork grew, so did the village. There were mills, cottages, and over 3 dozen structures and buildings still remain, many from the early 1800s. But by mid 1800s, iron production declined due to the discovery of coal ore. As the need for iron declined, then glassmaking was pursued by the town, but at that point the population already started to dwindle. When Joseph Wharton purchased the property, he primarily focused on forestry and agricultural endeavors. After Joseph Wharton passed in 1909, the property was managed by a trust. The state of New Jersey began buying the land in the 1950s. The last resident to leave the town left in 1936, but not before strange disappearances occurred. According to local legend and a bunch of conspiracy theorists, Ong's Hat offers a portal to a different dimension. In the 1970s, a few professors from Princeton fled there after being mocked by their quantum physics theories. This was when they claimed to have discovered interdimensional travel. According to other local legends, the devil is the 13th born son of the Leeds, the first inhabitants of New Jersey. Mother Leeds gave birth to a healthy baby, who within minutes transformed into this beast. This old ghost town is said to be a hotspot for the Jersey Devil activity, and in the last 50 years there have been numerous reports and encounters with the beast in this area. Some of these encounters include strange tracks along with hearing screams just outside of the village. One sighting of the Jersey Devil comes from a group that saw the creatures crossing the street in front of them. When visiting the village, some say you can feel his presence as if he's walking right behind you. In at number 2 we have Ludlow, Colorado. Located about 12 miles north of Trinidad, Ludlow, Colorado is a ghost town known for an infamous event in 1914. A former mining camp, it was the location of the Ludlow Massacre. Beginning in 1910, the resident coal miners grew unhappy over their dangerous working conditions and began to debate a strike. By 1913, a strike had begun, much to the dismay of owner John B. Rockefeller. On April 20th, 1914, there was a massacre in Ludlow, where the Colorado National Guard and Colorado Fuel and Iron Company guards attacked miners, burning their tents to the ground. Known as the Ludlow Massacre, 25 people lost their lives. The massacre was the height of the Colorado Coalfield War, which began a year earlier in 1913. Two coal mining counties, Las Animas and Huerfano, were the centers of the conflict. The United Mine Workers of America led the strike against the Colorado Fuel and Iron, owned by Rockefeller. They were upset over the horrible working conditions. Both parties led attacks back and forth over the years. Today, the old company town of Ludlow still stands as a ghost town, and the site of the tent city is also kept reserved, now under the care of the United Mine Workers of America. A monument to the deceased was also built by the Union at the site. In addition, the cellar where so many innocents perished is still in place. The doorway can still be seen and the dark depths of the pit can still be viewed. Though this isn't recommended, as many people who visit the abandoned ghost town report a strange feeling when looking through the doorway, and even worse, possible whispers around them with an unexplainable source. And finally, in at number 1 we have Helltown, Ohio. The abandoned town known as Helltown can be found in the Cuyahoga Valley in Ohio. There sits an eerie, deserted town known by locals to be haunted. No people live in the area anymore, though there are still remnants of the lives of former residents left behind. The whole town is surrounded by hazardous roads that seemingly lead to nowhere. Locals believe this was done to confuse any wandering explorers. But the Helltown Church seems to have inspired the town's ominous name. The tiny white church is in the center of Helltown and is central to all local theories. Some say the church was a place of worship for practicing Satanists who still lurk around the closed-off roads, hoping to recruit unwelcome visitors. Others believe the town was evacuated after a chemical spill that resulted in bizarre mutations of the residents and animal population. The legend of the Peninsula Python stems from this theory. There even sits an abandoned school bus in the town with legends of its own. The story goes that the bus was carrying a group of high school students who were going to one of the ski resorts near Boston when an elderly woman flagged down the bus. She was in a panicked state and explained that there was a young boy in her house who was seriously hurt. The bus driver, in an attempt to help, turned down her driveway and drove into the woods hoping to help the boy. When the bus approached the house, Satan worshippers swarmed it and sacrificed all those on board. The bus sat back there for over 30 years, standing as a warning to all who decide to venture into Helltown. A local paranormal investigator set out to research the abandoned town, and to his surprise, what he discovered was truly frightening. He describes Helltown as not just truly abandoned, but is home to many spirits and hauntings. His personal experience with a ghost encounter was returning to his car to find strange people looking into his car windows. Both times the people vanished as soon as they saw him approaching the car before he had a chance to speak to them. Coming in at number 4 we have at Bannock, Montana. The once bright star of Montana is now a ruin, a town in arrested decay, with few remaining storefronts, saloons, and hotels. The town was founded in 1862 when a group of Pikes Peakers from the goldfields of Colorado set up camp on the banks of the creek. Finding gold, the miners staked claims and promptly failed to keep the find a secret. By the spring of 1863, the area boasted a population of 5,000. By 1864, Bannock had started to fade, losing importance. The remnants of the past still exist with empty buildings and weathered wood. Today, over 60 structures remain standing, most of which can be explored. The town is known as a site for paranormal activity. It is known that ghosts of the abandoned town walk the streets of Bannock. The most common ghost story, though, is the story of Dorothy Dunn. In August 1916, Dorothy Dunn, her cousin Fern, and a friend waded into a dredge pond and stepped into deep water, but none of the three knew how to swim. Luckily, a passerby was able to save both Fern and the friend, but Dorothy was not as lucky. Today, the site of the tragic drowning is referred to as Dorothy's Hole. Sometime after the accident, Bertie saw a ghost of her friend upstairs in the hotel of the town. She recognized Dorothy by her long blue dress. Although Bertie rarely discussed the sightings, other visitors began to report seeing the spirit of a young girl in a long blue dress in the window of the hotel. Others have reported cold spots, and some have reported trying to speak to the girl in a long blue dress. Bannock was filled with adult workers, crimies, murders, and of course the notorious sheriff and outlaw Henry Plummer, whose vast gang terrorized and robbed southwest Montana for years. Henry Plummer was handsome, well-dressed, and charismatic. He was also able to gain the trust of the area miners and was soon elected sheriff of the community. However, little did the citizens of Bannock know, but their new sheriff led a secret band of road agents called the Innocents, who began to terrorize the travelers between Bannock and Virginia City, robbing and ending more than 100 men over the next several months. Once caught for his terrible actions, Henry Plummer met his fatal end at the hands of the town's citizens. Today, many say that the ghost of Henry Plummer haunts this old settlement. Perhaps he wants to avenge his name.
In third place, we have the Warner Brothers Jungle Habitat. Originally opening on July 19th of 1972, this now abandoned park closed its doors by 1976, which is a really bad timeline for a theme park that was technically never completed. The first time Jungle Habitat made headlines was only months after it first opened for business, when an Israeli tourist named Abraham Levy was riding through the safari in a taxicab and decided to roll down the window to get a better look at some of the animals roaming around. Two lions attacked the car and mauled the 26-year-old tourist, causing lacerations to his face and shoulder. He took credit for the harm, citing his own foolishness, which helped to dodge, I guess, like a media onslaught. For the most part. By the end of the year, reports of animals escaping into the wilds of West Milford, which is where the park is located, were far too many in volume to be ignored. Besides the sightings of harmless animals like peacocks, there were numerous rumors spreading about dangerous animals such as like a pack of wolves and a lion being sighted along like local roads. Okay, look, I grew up in the land of moose, and I wouldn't want to see one of those on the side of the highway. I can't imagine seeing a lion on the side of one. These sentiments voiced way back in the day are identical to the rumors still running rampant today. Tales told by local residents who have, looked out into their backyards include wandering ostriches and a band of baboons running amok in the town's pharmacy. Guess they needed a prescription filled. Emus, baboons, and even wolves are just some of the uncaged critters which have been known to actually have escaped the park. I feel like I found the origins for the Night at the Museum franchise. On July 8th of 1974, a 68-year-old visitor from Long Island was grabbed by the trunk of a baby elephant, which then slammed her against a fence and bit her. The woman, her name's Elizabeth Ennis by the way, was later awarded $200,000 by a court. In an account in the New York Times, she claimed the elephant bit her on the right hand, and because of the trauma incurred by being slammed into the fence, she had persistent pain in her right side that prevented her from lifting heavy items. Her husband was awarded $5,000 for the loss of companionship. I'm just glad that's all that she went through. Goodness. Elephants are pretty big. The animals also had a tendency to damage the cars that passed through. An e-museum for the park that exists online now says that the tigers like to bite and pop car tires, and monkeys like to rip antennas off the cars. Sounds like a lack of good animal training and boundaries to me, but I'm no animal expert. Right after the park closed in October of 1976, some of the animal carcasses were left outside. This pile grew until, 30 animal bodies, including that of an elephant, a bison, camel, and some zebras, were all left lying until April, when the ground had thawed enough to finally bury what was left of them. The 6 months that they were left exposed was a violation of state laws, which stated that any animal should be buried within 48 hours of its passing. Despite this violation, Warner Brothers were not sanctioned. Jungle habitat is gone now, but never forgotten. Reports of mysterious kangaroo sightings in remote corners of West Milford still turn up from time to time. Be careful, kangaroos hurt. In second place, we have the Joyland deaths. Located in Wichita, Kansas, Joyland once featured state-of-the-art rides and attractions, holding a reign of 55 years of fun and joy. Today, the once popular park is being reclaimed by nature, piece by piece by piece by piece. Joyland came into existence on June 12th of 1949. It was founded by Lester Ottaway and his sons, Herbert and Harold. Now, Herb had a passion for steam engines and race cars, and he refurbished both types of vehicles. By 1934, Herb Ottaway had refurbished a miniature steam locomotive and cars, and was traveling with them to county fairs in Kansas and Colorado. Joyland was originally opened to give Herb's refurbished locomotive a more permanent home. As the attraction became more popular, the Ottoways eventually added a number of different rides and games to the amusement park. Now, Lester Ottaway passed away in the mid-1950s, but his sons continued running Joyland until the early 1970s, when they decided to, retire. Joyland was then sold to Stanley and Margaret Nelson, who owned the park until it closed its doors in 2004. Joyland featured attractions such as a wooden roller coaster, my personal favorite kind of coaster, a wacky shack dark ride, a log jam, a sky coaster, bumper cars, the classic carousel, and of course, a Ferris wheel. Now, on April 6th of 2004, a 13-year-old girl was enjoying a Ferris wheel ride with her friends when the restraint bar holding them in came undone. The young girl fell more than 30 feet, suffering multiple head, arm, and leg injuries, and it's a miracle that she survived. The Ferris wheel was immediately closed, while both private and federal investigations looked into whether everything was, safe and up to code. The ride managed to, reopen eventually after these investigations were wrapped up, so okay, I wonder what to code means anymore. Another notable ride at Joyland was the wooden roller coaster that was known as the Nightmare. Although the roller coaster was a staple at the amusement park, it too saw its fair share of injuries. On May 25th of 1977, one rider stood up in one of these carts and fell. He passed at the scene from injuries sustained from the fall. Another death occurred 20 years later on August 27th of 1998 when a 35-year-old maintenance worker named Kevin Briley was under the ride trimming the grass. He stood up and was tragically hit by the roller coaster. He also died at the scene from his injuries. My heart hurts telling that tale because I'm such a huge lover of traditional wooden roller coasters. There's just something about narrowly avoiding whiplash that I personally find thrilling. Joyland closed its doors in 2004. Maybe it might be worth, a little urban exploration. In first place, time to visit the ghosts of the Enchanted Forest. The whimsical 20-acre amusement park was built in an Oregon forest and boasted handcrafted attractions like Storybook Lane and Topsville Western Town, along with rides like the Ice Cream Mountain bobsled roller coaster and a big timber log ride. Sounds pretty magical, right? Yeah, that all depends on who you ask. Though many folks experience nothing more than a charming park, other more normal experiences are definitely not in line with a regular amusement park. For many, a visit to the Enchanted Forest can be a supernatural phenomenon, and I know I'd be happy either way. I love all things fantastical and wonderful and whimsical, but also spooky. Tales of employees feeling a ghostly presence on attractions like the Haunted House and Challenge of Mondor ride caught my eye while doing research for today. The story of Enchanted Forest starts with Roger Toft, the park's creator, who spent every last penny he had to make his passion project come to life in 1971. His granddaughter, Ashley Toft, is now the park's general manager, and while she claims she's personally never experienced any supernatural phenomena on the Haunted House, she did admit that the attraction makes her feel anxious and overwhelmed. While guiding a group of experienced paranormal experts through the attraction, she led them directly to a cold spot that could be attributed to an otherworldly presence. As much as I understand the stigma of not wanting to believe in ghosts, that's a coincidence I can't just ignore. Challenge of Mondor ride operator Chris Dunn has since told a tale of an inexplicable encounter that he experienced one morning in 2016 while prepping the wizard-themed target aiming attraction for the day. He explained how he heard footsteps behind him, but turned around. No one there. Mere seconds after hearing the footsteps, he described being hit with a strange energy throughout his body, one that made him dizzy and gave him a horrible case of chills. Now later in the day, the same thing happened, but with more intensity. He took photos of the ride not in operation and captured images of what looks to be an orb that changes shapes in 3 sequential photos. The 2 of the investigators I mentioned before were granted permission to spend a night unsupervised at the park and experience the chilling energy and the Challenge of Mondor and managed to communicate with a spirit in the haunted house. Notice how I haven't mentioned a park tragedy yet as the cause for anything? That's because unlike the other places on this list, there wasn't one. The haunted house was built during the original construction along with the rest of attractions, and Challenge of Mondor was constructed in 2006. Time to borrow that time machine I've been asking the powers that be for, and travel on back. In August of 1846, Oregon settlers and indigenous tribes of the Willamette Valley fought a terrible battle in present-day Salem, known as Battle Creek. The theory most people believe is that the energy could be the cause of the manifestation in the theme park, which was built in close proximity to the gruesome fight. You let me know what you think down in the comments.
Number 5 on this list is Atlantis Marine Park. We are headed all the way down under for this one because Atlantis Marine Park is actually in Australia. AustralianNews.com writes, Atlantis Marine Park was initially a huge success with families from WA and beyond flocking to the park to watch the live dolphin shows, swim in the pools, ride pedal boats, and have their obligatory photo with King Neptune, a huge statue at the entrance to the park. However, in 1990, just 9 years after opening, Atlantis shut its doors. Western Australia's boom never eventuated, and the 1987 stock market crash put a halt to prosperity. Atlantis closed due to financial difficulty and was left abandoned. It has since been damaged by vandals and has become overgrown and derelict. Old statues can still be found scattered throughout the grounds, as well as broken walls and concrete pools. For years, it was no man's land, popular with dog walkers. However, just last month, the iconic King Neptune was restored to his former glory after a petition by locals who started an online campaign for something to be done with the ruins. Well, I'm glad to see that Neptune is looking fresh again, but I don't know how long he'll stay that way. Apparently, this place, when the sun goes down, is home to some evil creatures. Four-legged mutant things with glowing red eyes that hiss and are nothing that we know of from this world. Now, this could be a bunch of baloney, but that's what some people have reported seeing when they've explored this place at night. Probably safe to go during the daytime, just make sure you set an alarm for 6 p.m. to get out of there if you do go. Number 4 on this list is Crinkly Bottom Theme Park. This one, to my understanding, has been demolished, but it still deserves a spot on this list because of how creepy it was when it was around. Mr. Blobby was a TV caricature in the early 1990s. He was featured on one of Britain's most successful late-night Saturday television shows and was this big pink blob creature with a bow tie on. This was a comedy television show, and this blob thing didn't lack any of that. He would often engage in annoying antics with celebrity guests and become a bit of a British television phenomenon. Well, Mr. Blobby was successful enough that he of course needed toys, merchandise, and heck, while we're at it, let's give him his own amusement park. Sometimes what works well on TV doesn't always translate to a fun amusement park though. Crinkly Bottom was what they called it, and it opened up in 1994. This annoying sidekick's popularity didn't last forever though, and this amusement park's life was very short-lived. The place shut down in 1996 because it simply was not making enough money. Then it faded away into obscurity and everybody forgot about this interesting little business venture. That was until 2009 though, when some urban explorers stumbled upon it again. The once bright and beautiful Blobby Land looked like something straight out of a horror film. It was worn and gross and just reeked of evil. Animals had taken up residence there, and based on how the place looked, it wouldn't have been surprising if some sketchy characters once did business there too. You can't visit it now because it's demolished, but you really shouldn't have been going when it was around anyways. Number 3 on this list is Boblo Island. I had to include Boblo Island on this list to give a bit of a shout out to Ontario, where your boy grew up. Boblo Island was wildly successful for a time and operated for nearly a century. As with a lot of places on this list though, it couldn't seem to power through the 90s and had to shut down. Reader's Digest says, picture an 1898 Victorian amusement park, music from an organ grinder, women's skirts swishing around the dance hall, children's laughter echoing from various newfangled rides. That's what this theme park on Boys Blank Island, nicknamed Boblo, near Detroit on the Canadian side of the Detroit River, was to residents alike. Its doors were shut nearly 100 years later in 1993, and the area is now closed to the public. But you can boat or kayak by the remains, listening for the ghostly sounds of long past visitors. While you can't stay here overnight, you can rent these 8 haunted places on Airbnb. Being on an island really adds to the creepiness for me, I think. Like this place, from all the pictures I could find, it really looks totally detached from all other society. Basically meaning that whatever happens here, you are totally by yourself. Like there is a new set of rules for this island. There have been stories that something lurks here, a spirit or something dark. Be very careful if you ever go to Boblo Island. Number 2 on this list is Pripyat Amusement Park. Pripyat is a town that we've talked a lot about on this channel already. In fact, it was recently featured in a video where we looked at the top 5 mysterious towns that are completely abandoned. Pripyat is a ghost town in northern Ukraine near the Ukrainian and Belarus border. It was named after the nearby river Pripyat and was founded in 1970. Right in the town is a small amusement park that once looked quite fun and had plans to grow into a big Ukrainian park that people might flock to. Those dreams were never realized though, and now it sits in complete and utter disarray. Those dreams were never realized because of the horrible accident that occurred in 1986. You see, the town of Pripyat was basically established to serve the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. When it was first built, it was a closed town basically only for the workers of this place, but it grew and grew as time went on, and at its height had a population of just under 50,000 people. I don't need to go into too much detail about the accident as a whole, because I imagine that you guys are all pretty aware. But basically, this was the worst accident of this nature in human history, and for all our sakes, we need to hope that it never happens again. The radiation damage was absolutely massive, and right after it happened, the entire town of Pripyat had to be evacuated. That, of course, has left the amusement park, right in the middle of this town, completely abandoned as well. Not a lot of people have gone to this town or park since this incident occurred. For a long time, it wasn't safe to set foot within a set radius of the blast. Those who have been brave or foolish enough to set foot into this town and explore the amusement park have reported some strange and scary findings. Rumor has it that some sort of entity lives there. Something dark and evil calling this abandoned place home. A nasty and sinister entity that doesn't like to be disturbed. There have been talks of this being some type of shadow creature or potentially a beast like a werewolf of sorts. Either way, the people who visit this place feel an overwhelming sense of dread when they're there. They also feel as if they're unwelcome, like they entered somebody's home who doesn't want them there. There are multiple reasons why this amusement park is abandoned, so I'd stay away if I was you. And finally, number 1 on this list is Six Flags. Now, I don't mean Six Flags as a chain or anything like that. There's 23 different Six Flags in the United States, and not all of them are haunted. One in particular, though, is currently out of commission, abandoned, and definitely a spot you shouldn't go to. All the Rooms writes, this Six Flags fell out of business following serious damage from Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The park opened in 2000 and was only operating for a few years before suffering significantly during the hurricane, which displaced 20,000 people and killed nearly 2,000 people. The park closed after Hurricane Katrina, and there wasn't enough funding for repairs, so it fell into further decay over the last few years. To this day, there's still an eerie sign at the entrance to the park that says closed for the storm. It's an apocalyptic site which has been taken advantage of by Hollywood and used for films such as Jurassic World and Dawn of Planet of the Apes. These filmmakers are way braver than I would be, because I would not want to be setting foot on those grounds. The people who have been here all seem to think that something paranormal is going on. Phantom noises echoing throughout the park and other random bodiless sounds are heard all the time. Similarly to a lot of the other things on this list, there is a massive overhanging feeling of dread. The air is thick with it, and you can almost taste the discomfort. No one has reported being attacked here, but it seems like that's only a matter of time if people keep going. The mayor of New Orleans is currently looking at demolishing this park, which, in my opinion, probably for the best.
Number 5, the Warner Brothers Jungle Habitat. Originally opening on July 19th of 1972, this park closed its doors by 1976, which is a really bad timeline for a theme park that was technically never completed. The first time Jungle Habitat made headlines was only months after it first opened for business, when an Israeli tourist named Abraham Levy was riding through the safari in a taxi cab and decided to roll down the window to get a better look at some of the animals roaming about. 2 lions attacked the car and mauled the 26-year-old tourist, causing lacerations to his face and shoulder. He took credit for the harm, citing his own foolishness, which helped to dodge a media onslaught. Well, for the most part. By the end of the year, reports of animals escaping into the wilds of West Milford were far too many in volume to be ignored. Besides sightings of harmless animals like peacocks, there were rumors spreading about dangerous animals such as a pack of wolves and a lion being sighted along local roads. These sentiments, voiced 28 years ago, are identical to the rumors still running rampant today. Yep, you heard me. Today. Tales told by West Milford residents who have looked out in their backyards include wandering ostriches and a band of baboons running amok in the town's pharmacy. Emus, baboons, and even wolves are just some of the uncaged critters which were known to have escaped the park. I feel like I found the origins for the Night at the Museum franchise. On July 8th of 1974, a 68-year-old visitor from Long Island was grabbed by the trunk of a baby elephant, which then slammed her against a fence and bit her. The woman, Elizabeth Ennis, was later awarded $200,000 by a court. In an account in the New York Times, she claims the elephant bit her on her right hand, and because of the trauma incurred by being slammed into the fence, she had persistent pain in her right side that prevented her from lifting heavy items. Her husband was awarded $5,000 for loss of companionship. So the animals at the park also had a tendency to damage the cars that passed through. An e-museum for the park says that tigers like to bite and pop car tires, and monkeys like to rip antennas off of cars. Sounds like a lack of good animal training and boundaries to me. So right after the park closed in 1976, some animal carcasses were left outside. This pile grew until 30 animal bodies, including that of an elephant, a bison, a camel, some zebras, were all left lying until April, when the ground had thawed enough to finally bury what was left of the bodies. The 6 months that they were left exposed was a violation of state laws, which stated that any animal should be buried within 48 hours of its death. Despite this violation, Warner Brothers was not sanctioned. Jungle habitat is gone now, but not forgotten. Reports of mysterious kangaroo sightings in remote corners of West Milford still turn up from time to time. Number 4. Under the Sea Gone Wrong. Disney's River Country was the first water park at Walt Disney World, and possibly the first themed water park ever. Look, as much as I love Disney World, and I'm mentally planning my next trip back, I'm here to call a spade a spade. Some consider River Country to be the first water park anywhere, but that depends on how you define a water park. Yes, River Country opened almost a year before Wet n Wild in Orlando, but there were public pools and lake parks with water slides and other aquatic play equipment long before River Country opened. So just as Disneyland had reinvented the amusement park 21 years earlier, River Country reinvented aquatic recreation. The water park's grand opening was on June 20th of 1976, and on Thursday, August 28th of 1980, a sad Associated Press story appeared in newspapers throughout North America. It was reported that a rare but deadly disease caused by an amoeba found in Florida freshwater lakes had claimed its 4th victim, a New York youngster who had spent his vacation swimming at River Country. The disease, amoebic meningoencephalitis, attacked the nervous system and brain. You don't want to know how many tries it took me to say that. The youngster died after the amoeba entered his nose, went through the nasal passage, and attacked the nervous system, including the brain. Investigators from the U.S. Center for Disease Control in Atlanta and the New York Health Department pinpointed River Country as the source of the amoeba after the parents reported that the amusement park was the only place where he went swimming. So photos and maps of River Country show that the park had 2 bodies of water. The smaller one was a clean, clear swimming pool. The larger one appeared to be a natural cove, completely open to Bay Lake, which is the largest natural lake at Walt Disney World. At some point in the 1990s, Walt Disney World banned swimming in its lake. The 1995 map of Walt Disney World still included the resort's beaches under the swimming section, whereas the 2000 edition made it clear that the beaches were strictly for sunbathing. But River Country stayed open. There was never another death from amoebic, very long word that I'm not going to try and say again, linked to River Country. But there were 2 drownings, one in 1982 and the other in 1989. So River Country had its normal seasonal closing at the end of the 2001 season, but when the time came for it to reopen for the 2002 season, it didn't. River Country never reopened.
Coming in at number 2, we have Jerome, Arizona. Located in Arizona, you will find the ghost town of Jerome. Once a copper mining town, Jerome was the 3rd largest town in the early 1900s. His streets were filled with 37 saloons, 13 bordellos, and a meager 4 churches in 1917, and again in 1926 after a mine blast damaged the original. A series of ill-fated events at this site would almost lead one to call it cursed. When the Great Depression hit, conditions in the town took a sharp downturn. Plagued with man-made disasters and poor fortune, Jerome's population gradually dwindled from thousands to somewhere between 20 to 50 residents. Finally, in 1950, the town was abandoned for good. A number of visitors have recounted other mysterious sightings. Visual apparitions range from human-shaped figures that roam the halls and stairways of the old hotel to a friendly animal that is said to scratch and meow at the doors. Additionally, one of the town's most well-known ghosts is said to lurk at the town's community center. Formerly called Lawrence Memorial Hall, the building is more often familiarly termed Spook Hall due to several strange happenings. With all the other apparitions wandering about this historic town, the cemetery, of course, known as the most haunted place in the whole town. Visitors here have made numerous reports of dark figures moving about, the sound of ethereal footsteps, and the sounds of distant voices. The old cemetery includes graves dating from 1897 to 1942. And finally in at number 1 we have Cerro Gordo, California. Cerro Gordo is a ghost town located in Death Valley and is considered one of the best abandoned places in California. Cerro Gordo means fat hills in Spanish. It was named this for the vast amount of silver it contained. By the end of 1869 the city flourished and became well known for its promising business. By 1871 Cerro Gordo was well established as a mining town. The American Hotel was completed that year, as were several other permanent structures, a general store, restaurants and saloons. At its height the town had 5,000 residents. In 1875 Cerro Gordo suffered a series of setbacks, necessitating the shutdown of its furnaces. These problems resulted from a scarcity of ore in the mine, which had lasted for several months, and the temporary drying up of its water supply. In addition, by late 1876 a fire accident happened through some of the mine buildings and the union shaft, and the furnaces were closed the following February due to the disaster. A more lethal blow was dealt by falling lead and silver prices, effectively ending this era of activity at Cerro Gordo. Because of all the tragedy that occurred in Cerro Gordo, there's been multiple paranormal investigations held at the grounds of the abandoned town. While the new owner of the town was purchasing it, he was warned that they might have some visitors hanging around, and by visitors they meant spirits. One of the now owner's ghost stories goes along the lines of, as he was walking toward the bunkhouse he looked at the window, the curtain pulled to the side and a little face poked out. Under the assumption that the contractors were staying in the bunkhouse, he asked when they were leaving and he was told that they're gone for 2 weeks. So a little uneasy he locked up the door and went for a hike. By the time he got back the kitchen light was on, even with the lock still on the door. Coming in at number 5 we have Goldfield, Arizona. Being deemed as one of Arizona's most haunted places, we have the town of Goldfield. Founded in 1893, Goldfield was a promising land for gold mining. The town grew rapidly, gaining 1,500 residents during its first year. The space was quick to build businesses including stores, a blacksmith, a butcher, a brewery and 3 saloons. Though the town of Goldfield met its fall just as quickly as it was built up. After 5 short years, the gold ran out and people began to dwindle, eventually leaving it fully abandoned, securing its ghost town status. Being classified as a ghost town doesn't necessarily mean a place is haunted by ghosts, but this is not the case for the Goldfield ghost town. There's plenty of documentation and investigations that point to Goldfield being a paranormal active ground. It is known that a mysterious figure lurks within the shadows of the Goldfield ghost town, Bordello. It is unclear who this spirit would have been in life, yet it is commonly believed he was once a miner who lived in the town. Unexplainable knocks and bangs are heard in the building and some unfortunate visitors have been scratched. This activity is attributed to a dark character who's usually seen wearing a cowboy hat. Just on the horizon of the Goldfield ghost town sits a landscape made ominous by its name and the legend surrounding it. The Superstition Mountains are cloaked in mystery and at the center of many fables, making them notorious among the paranormal community. The Superstition Mountains carry many secrets, the most famous being the location of a supposed deposit of gold and riches in the Lost Dutchman's gold mine. A curse has kept this treasure safe since the days of Goldfield's mining boom. Many have set out to locate these riches and many have returned empty-handed or found only death. Countless adventurers have perished in the Arizona heat pursuing this chase. Their ghosts are said to now haunt the mountainside. Other secrets of the mountain have people believing that the hill is a place where evil spirits hid and told stories of a devil that lived behind the mountain. There's also a rumored apparition of a hugely tall skeleton named the Borrego Phantom, which appears to those exploring the mountain after dark. Another layer of creepiness is added to the mountain by the local legend that reptile-looking people surface there after dark. All of these creepy mysteries are summed up pretty nicely in the Superstition Mountain's name. In at number 4 we have Glen Rio, New Mexico. Found on the state border of Texas and New Mexico lies the town of Glen Rio. Founded in 1901, it was a town where wheat and cattle farmers settled and grew a community. Being divided between 2 states made for some unusual customs in Glen Rio. The mail would arrive at a train depot on the Texas side but would have to be transported to the post office on the New Mexico side. The Texas side was part of a dry county, so all the bars were on the New Mexico side. Because the gasoline tax was higher in New Mexico, all the service stations were on the Texas side. By 1920, Glen Rio had a hotel, a hardware store and a land office, as well as several grocery stores, service stations and cafes. Though Glen Rio's permanent population never rose above 30 people, the town survived with its tourist-based businesses catering to the many travellers along Route 66. By 1985, only 2 residents remained in the small town, and the Texas Post Office was the only business open. It too has long since closed. Other buildings have overgrown sites, missing windows, or debris surrounding them. The detritus of 4 decades when Glenroe welcomed tens of thousands, fed and entertained them, and sent them on their way towards Chicago or California. In at number 3, we have Nevada City in Montana. Miners settled in Nevada City in 1963, along with establishing their homes and businesses in this new town. Located in southwestern Montana, the town is 1.5 miles from Virginia City. The town was thriving up until 1876 when the gold miners moved to other promising sites. In 1896, the Connery Placer Mining Company destroyed most of the city's buildings. The company dredged the gulch and later abandoned it, leaving heavy wooden barges. This abandoned town being haunted is old news, as the Nevada City Hotel is reported to be frequented by the apparition of a road agent who lost their life nearby, according to online sources. Visitors have also reported hearing footsteps in the hallways and seeing shadowy figures standing behind their reflections in mirrors. Additionally, the spirit of an older cowboy figure who never speaks but lurks in the hotel rooms and even sits at the bar in the Virginia City. Back when the hotel operated, guests also complained of a weeping woman, always in the same room, only to be told there was no guest in the room in question.
Number 2 on this list is the Poole Park Asylum. This asylum in Wales has been abandoned for over 3 decades now. Atlas Obscura says, like any good abandoned asylum, damp, dilapidated, and deathly silent. The estate of Poole Park began as a deer park for the nearby Ruthin Castle. Following its time as a hunting ground, the property was passed between a series of wealthy landowners. The elegant mock Tudor-style manor house that still stands today was constructed in 1862 for the second Lord Bagot. In 1937, the house was sold to the North Wales County's Mental Hospital, which was in need of a second location to house overflow patients from the nearby Denbigh Insane Asylum. Poole Park held 87 patients at capacity, but in times of need had as many as 120. For a brief stint of time during World War II, the grounds also held a prisoner of war camp. Today, the solid wooden floors and intricate wood paneling have rotted due to water damage. The house has been looted for lead and copper, and its ceilings are dripping water and shedding plaster. You'll be hard-pressed to find an intact window. This was a smaller asylum than some of the other ones on this list, but don't take that to mean that it wasn't as bad or brutal. People suffered here, just as much as in the bigger asylums. It was just a bit more personal here, considering there weren't that many people. It also wasn't just mental patients who suffered, but as you can probably imagine, the prisoners of war didn't fare too well either. There were definitely a few disappearances, if you will, during that time of the asylum's life. Now, people are free to come and go as you wish, considering the asylum is abandoned, but there are a few ghosts that are fully trapped here. These ghosts are of mental patients and war vets alike, and they are forever bonded to this place, forced to live in this horrible purgatory. You probably don't want to visit this place for fear that they could keep you there with them. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Creedmoor Psychiatric Center, Building 25. High probability that if you got sent to this place, then you are never getting out again. Atlas Obscura says, opened in 1912, Creedmoor State Hospital was initially the farm colony of Brooklyn State Hospital, now Kingsborough, with 32 patients who worked the farmland as part of their treatment. Like many other similar institutions, over the first half of the 20th century, the population at Creedmoor rapidly expanded before deinstitutionalization occurred beginning in the 1950s, at which point the hospital shrank from 8,000 to 500 patients in the span of only 4 decades. The 1970s were a rough time for the hospital when crime infested the campus. 3 assaults, 22 violent assaults, 52 fires, 130 burglaries, 6 people taking their own life, a shooting, and a riot occurred within 20 months of each other. It was around this time that Building 25 was abandoned. Never sold off or demolished, it has been rotting on the hospital grounds since it was vacated in the early 1970s. Yeah, so with everything that went down here, I think it's pretty clear that if you got sent here, odds were not in your favor. These were all things that happened outside of the asylum too. Inside the asylum with the patients and everything, you had the same sick experiments and treatments going down as some of the other ones on this list. Thank goodness it closed down and it isn't operating anymore.
Coming in at number 5, Poveglia Island, Italy. At first glance, Poveglia Island may seem like a picturesque Italian island. However, it is actually home to one of the scariest haunted hospitals in the world. For more than 100 years, beginning in 1776, the island was used as a quarantine station for those suffering from the plague and other diseases, and later as a mental hospital. The hospital itself was an absolute nightmare, with one doctor in particular being known for performing cruel experiments on patients, oftentimes with no anesthetic, sanitization, or even respect for keeping the patients alive. Now, some reports say that karma got to the doctor, and he in turn began to suffer from all the tortures of the dead, because he eventually flung himself from the hospital's bell tower, killing himself in hopes of freeing himself. The hospital was met by a lot of death, with it rumored that 50% of the soil there is human ash. As you would expect, the island is now home to some terrifying paranormal activity, with people risking their own safety to explore the abandoned hospital, but those that do often leave shaken, claiming they felt watched. Some even claim to have seen shadows that followed them around the place, heard voices, or seen things move by themselves. Very creepy indeed. Coming in at number 4, Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, West Virginia. Also known as the Western State Hospital, this was a Kirkbride psychiatric hospital that was in operation between 1864 to 1994 in West Virginia. Now, this asylum, like the rest of our list, has quite the reputation due to the barbarism that took place at the hospital. Not to mention, it was also one of the most popular haunted hospitals in America for that very reason. Now, prior to the construction of the hospital, its grounds saw a lot of bloodshed, with Civil War soldiers being killed on the grounds, even before the building was fully erected. Originally designed to house 250 patients in solitude, the hospital holds 717 patients by 1880, 1,661 in 1938, and over 1,800 in 1949. At its peak, 2,600 in the 1950s in overcrowded conditions. Trans-Allegheny quickly became home to more violence than anyone could have ever imagined over the course of the next century. At the height of its use, the asylum became infamous for being home to staff abuse and having incredibly violent patients who were often left unattended. Now, it seems as though the former asylum has some ghostly residents, including that of a young girl named Lily, who died alone just wanting to play with someone. Another ghostly denizen is Ruth, a woman who was placed in Trans-Allegheny due to being so violent. To this day, she still seems to have a vendetta against people, with many claiming to be attacked by unseen hands that allegedly are her own. Coming in at number 3, we have Severals Hospital, England. Severals Hospital is a former psychiatric hospital located in Colchester, Essex, formerly managed by the North Essex Partnership University NHS Foundation Trust. It quickly became one of the scariest and most haunted hospitals in the entire world. Now, for a period of time, this was the leading hospital for electroshock therapies, as well as lobotomies in all of the UK. In the 1950s, psychiatrists experimented with new treatments on patients, now considered unsuitable, such as the use of frontal lobotomy. Many of the patients housed at Severals Hospital weren't even mentally ill, yet were still given these barbaric treatments. In fact, in some of the records, patients range from women who gave birth out of wedlock to moody teenagers. Following the treatments, many people were never the same, with some even passing away during the stay at their hospital. During World War II, the hospital was severely affected due to bombs being dropped by Germany, resulting in 38 women being killed, with many more injured. Now the hospital is closed, however, people that visit the grounds often report a very deep sense of fear, sorrow, and even mourning. Some visitors have even reported to see shadow people lurking in the corners of some of the rooms. As of today, the hospital is no longer open to visitors, with it remaining completely abandoned. However, some urban explorers still roam the remains to see if the hauntings are true. Coming in at number 2, we have Waverly Hills Sanatorium, Kentucky. Very few hospitals have as dark a past as Waverly Hills Sanatorium, making it one of the scariest hospitals, not just in the United States, but in the entire world. Now closed, the Waverly Hills Sanatorium is located in Louisville, Kentucky, with the opening as a 2-story hospital in 1910 to accommodate 40 to 50 tuberculosis patients. However, in the early 1900s, Jefferson County was struck by an outbreak of tuberculosis, which prompted the construction of a new hospital. However, some of the treatments they offered for tuberculosis included fresh air exposure, even during the winter. Other treatments included ballooning the lungs or even removing a lung entirely. As you would imagine, these treatments didn't have a high success rate, resulting in a large amount of deaths and a reputation for being a place where no one is left alive. Now, according to some reports, the deaths grew so rapidly the hospital was forced to create an underground tunnel in order to cart the bodies out without having patients see them. The tunnel was an entrance and exit for the workers of the Sanatorium. It was built on the first floor with the rest of the building. They did this to increase morale, as patients were finding it a little upsetting to see deceased patients be carted away, so the hospital decided to perform those acts more discreetly via the tunnel. They also believed that this would help lower the disease's spreading rate. Now, once TB rates began to die down, the Sanatorium became a mental hospital that quickly became overcrowded. Patients would often undergo treatments such as lobotomy, not to mention experimental procedures and physical abuse by staff. These days, it is known as one of the most haunted hospitals in the world, which houses the room where a nurse killed herself after finding out she was pregnant with the doctor's baby. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Beechworth Lunatic Asylum, Australia. Australia is filled to the brim with terrifying wildlife that could, on any given day, potentially kill you. So saying that, it might not come as much of a surprise to know that Australia has some equally as terrifying hospitals, including Beechworth Lunatic Asylum. Originally known as Beechworth Asylum, this is a decommissioned hospital in the town of Victoria, Australia. It ultimately closed in 1995 after 128 years of operation. For those 128 years, Beechworth Asylum was home to some of Australia's most violent criminals. It was also notorious for its abusive staff members, as well as for a number of unexplained disappearances. It is said that Beechworth conducted some of the typical medical treatments of that time, including straitjackets, restraint chairs, and isolation cages, all of which were standard forms of treatment for those suffering from mental illness. Now, all it took to land you in Beechworth Asylum was a couple of signatures, one from a friend or relative, and the other from a doctor. So saying that, it was easy for people to get rid of husbands or wives that they didn't want around anymore. Now, with such a troubled past, it will come as no surprise to learn that Beechworth is haunted, with one sighting involving the ghost of a nurse, Matron Sharp, who was said to wander the halls of the asylum, presenting a comforting presence. One of the cruelest aspects of Beechworth was what is known as ha-ha walls. Now, the key feature of these walls was a trench built on the interior of the asylum's walls. Now, this in turn made the wall appear low enough that it seemed that the inmates weren't actually imprisoned, whereas on the inside it ensured that none of them could actually escape. In at number 2, we have Custer, Idaho. The mining town of Custer was born in 1879 by gold miners looking for their next gold hotspot. Prospectors discovered gold in what would become known as the Yankee Fork area of central Idaho in 1867. The area was worked on a small scale for more than a decade before the discovery of General Custer Mine. The General Custer Mining Company closed in 1888 and the district experienced a sharp decline. In 1899, the town of Custer has 5 saloons, 3 stores, a hotel and 3 boarding houses, but the town never established even one church. By 1910, most of the mines in the area were closed, and the Yankee Forks boom years came to an end. The combined population of Custer and the nearby Bonanza was just 66 people. The Silver Messenger reports just 2 families remaining in Custer in 1911, and then being fully abandoned the year following. Today, it has been purchased by the US Forestry Service and, in conjunction with the Friends of Custer Society, is slowly being made into a historic site. Some original buildings have already been renovated, some are in process, and many others are slated to be restored. Several buildings lost in a 1960s grass fire are due to be replaced with replicas. The Forgotten Town is a landmark for many people such as tourists and especially paranormal investigators. In the old schoolhouse is a museum containing items left behind and showcases the town's unique history. Although interesting, you can't help but get an eerie feeling thinking about the people who once owned these items, as walking into one of these structures is like walking back in time. To think this town was once active with human energy and miners working every single day. And finally, in at number 1, we have South Pass City, Wyoming. Only about 10 miles north of the Oregon Trail is the shell of a town that used to be a busy gold mining camp. Established in a small valley along the banks of Willow Creek, the town was born in 1867. The town was built there because gold was discovered in the Wind River Mountains. By 1868, South Pass City boasted over 250 250 buildings, 1,000 people, and hundreds of claims. The town was extremely busy as its half-a-mile-long main street boasted numerous hotels, restaurants, general stores, 2 newspapers, doctors, a bowling alley, and dozens of saloons. The mining district continued to grow to as many as 3,000 residents. Miners looking for investors and newspapers promoting further settlement in the area exaggerated the region's amount of gold. But for South Pass City, its great success wouldn't last, and just 2 years after its establishment would begin to show its first signs of declining. Hitting a fall in early 1869, the town resurged briefly after outsider capital was poured into the area, but would fall again as expenses and hardships to recover the gold proved too costly for most miners. By 1872, the town was only occupied by only a few hundred people. In the end, South Pass would become a permanent ghost town. By 1949, the last of the pioneer families had moved on from South Pass City, and the buildings had fallen into disrepair. The grounds of the old town are known to be haunted, and Highway 287 that follows the route of the Oregon Trail over South Pass, which is the reason South Pass City ever existed, has had its fair share of ghost sightings. According to a local ghost story, a woman was driving home from a long day in Denver. Her friend had fallen asleep in the passenger seat. After passing through Jeffrey City, the driver spotted a dark, hunched figure walking toward the road in the sagebush. About a half-mile later, she saw the same figure closer to the road. She noted his pig coat as he became clearer. About a half-mile later, still thinking about this man and his surprising reappearance, she reached over to wake her friend and request she take a turn driving. As her friend awoke, she saw the same man at the edge of the road, just crossing the white line onto the highway next to the car. Screaming, they accelerated away and compared descriptions. It was certainly the same man.
In 5th place, we have Isla de las Muñecas, Mexico. Decided to kick off today by being an overachiever. This is an entire abandoned island. The island of the dolls in Mexico is like something straight out of a horror movie, but my kind of horror movie. Located on Texuelo Lake, it is home to hundreds of hanging, slowly decaying dolls, thanks to a man named Don Julian Santana. Over 50 years ago, Don Santana left his wife and child and moved onto an island on Texuelo Lake in the Exocamilicos canals. According to him, a young girl actually drowned in the lake in the 1950s, and Don Julian Santana devoted his life to honoring this lost soul by collecting and hanging up dolls by the hundreds. Eventually, he transformed the entire island into a doll-infested wonderland. Now, he began collecting lost dolls from the canals and the trash near his island home. He's also said to have traded produce he grew to locals for more dolls. Don didn't really clean up the dolls or attempt to fix them, but he rather put them up with missing eyes and limbs, covered in dirt, and generally in whatever ramshackle state he found them in. Even when dolls arrived in good shape, the wind and weather turned them into cracked and distorted versions of themselves. Don also kept his cabin filled with the dolls, which he dressed in headdresses, sunglasses, and other various accessories. Despite the fact that most people found the island frightening, Don saw the dolls as beautiful protectors, and he welcomed visitors, whom he would, show around, charging a small fee for taking photos. In 2001, Don Santana was found drowned in the same area in which he believed that small child had passed away. According to legend, the dolls in the island are haunted by the spirits of the dead girl, and perhaps even by Don himself. Okay, who wants to go on a road trip with me? Anyone?
Oh, thanks.
In 3rd place, time to visit the Bodie State Historic Park. So formerly a genuine gold mining town, located east of the Sierra Nevada mountain range in Mono County, California, and now a national landmark, it is known as one of the best preserved ghost towns in the world. It is named after W.S. Bodie, first name unknown, but rumored to be either William or Waterman, who discovered gold in 1859 in an area now known as Brody Bluff. He tragically passed in a snowstorm that same winter, and was never present for what came to be. According to pioneer Judge McClinton, the district's name was changed from the proper spelling of B-O-D-E-Y to B-O-D-Y, and then a few other phonetic variations, to eventually B-O-D-I-E, after a painter in the nearby boomtown of Aurora lettered a sign as such. An accidental typo that stuck through history, which is a good reminder to proofread your work. I don't do it enough. While the output from the mine is largely insignificant in terms of mining history, the violence and early endings to lives tell a different story. And a particularly harsh winter between 1878 and 79 claimed hundreds of lives, with many others perishing from falling timbers and explosions underground. So Bodie as a town grew to have a reputation for violence and lawlessness. And unlike other mining camps at the time, killings were daily events. Robberies, stage holdups, and fights happened at such a frequency that no complete record could be kept. Reverend F.M. Warrington would describe the area in 1881 as a sea of sin, lashed by the tempests of lust and passion. The first of 4 mysterious fires tore through the business district in 1892, the next destroying the town mill in 1912, and another destroying the same mill again in 1898. The last of the unknown fires demolished most of what was left of the now ghost town in 1932, taking many lives way too soon in the process. So when the last producing mine shut down after 1945, very few people were left living in what was left of the town, and all eventually met untimely ends. One man shot his wife unprompted, and 3 other men from the town took it upon themselves to take his life for that act. So according to historians, the ghost of that man would visit the 3 men after his passing, shaking his fist and appearing as if he was cursing them out. Those men soon died of mysterious diseases and illnesses. Visitors to the area have reported meeting spirits that leave them feeling suffocated, seeing doors open and close on their own, and rocking chairs that may or may not have a menacing older lady staring them down, or even the empty chair rocking on its own. So Bodie might be a bit of a tourist destination nowadays, but if you remove anything from the land, like I'm talking like a pebble, you'll be cursed with remorse and tragedy. The park keeps a logbook of all letters and items returned to them, with each thief writing an apology note to Bodie for what was taken. The curse is upheld by the ghosts of residents past who guard against thieves and protect the town's treasures. Okay, so kleptos, steer clear or be cursed. In second place, we have the island of Poveglia. Yep, another entire abandoned island. This one's a little creepier though. So the island is located in the lagoon near Venice and is famous for being one of the most haunted places in Italy. Tourists and locals alike are banned from the island, which was used for centuries as a place to exile the sick to prevent the spread of disease and contain the mentally ill in an asylum built in the late 1800s. Yes, I'll backtrack and elaborate. So in 1348, the bubonic plague arrived in Venice and Poveglia, like many other small islands at the time, and it became a quarantine colony. The plague on average killed like 1 out of 3 Europeans, by the way. So fearing the unbridled spread of the disease, Venice exiled many of its symptom-bearing citizens there. So at the island center, the dead and those too sick to protest were burned on giant pyres. So this included the tens of thousands of Venice citizens just dying on the mainland. Those fires would burn once more in 1630 when the Black Death again swept through the city. The small island was used as a mass burial ground, and ashes from human remains make up as much as 50% of the island's soil. Cripes, I hope it's a good fertilizer. The deaths of nearly 160,000 people on the island have given it its nickname, the Island of Ghosts. A doctor at the asylum was known to have experimented on patients with crude lobotomies and jumped from the bell tower in the late 1930s after claiming he had been driven mad by ghosts. Decades later, nearby residents claimed to still hear the bell, although it was removed many years earlier. A report titled Haunted History states that some restoration work had started in recent history, but abruptly stopped without explanation. Okay, maybe this is one spot on today's list that I might not want to visit. And in first place, we have St. Elmo in Colorado. St. Elmo is a ghost town and allegedly the best preserved ghost town in all of Colorado, while also boasting the most hauntings and paranormal activity of any ghost town in the state. The town was a major gold and silver trading center and hub of life for many pioneers, outlaws, and miners for decades. So it was originally called Forest City, but St. Elmo was settled in 1878 and became an official township in 1880 with the arrival of the first post office. So the residents of the town were forced to change the name because there were already too many forest cities in the area. So gotta applaud the originality. St. Elmo went through a massive gold rush, reaching the height of its population of 2,000 residents in only 10 days. The majority of the town worked in one of the 4 local mines. The Mary Murphy mine was the most profitable mine and the longest operating, having produced over $60 million worth of gold while it was in operation. When the mines began to close down, the town began to dwindle. The Mary Murphy mine continued to operate until 1922, but was shut down when the railroad was abandoned. Postal service was discontinued in 1952 after the death of St. Elmo's postmaster. Now for the fun part, ghost stories. I saved the best for last for a reason. The most famous ghost of St. Elmo is Annabelle Dirty Annie Stark, not to be confused with the beloved Annabelle doll. This Annabelle is the descendant of Anton and Anna Stark, who arrived in St. Elmo with the Pacific Railroad in 1881. Anton was a section boss in the mines, while Anna ran the Home Comfort Hotel located on Poplar Street and the general store. Oh, and both structures are still standing today. Anna Stark was known as a cruel and harsh woman who never allowed her 3 children, Roy, Tony, and Annabelle, out in the town to mingle or work alongside what she deemed the simple town folk. Annabelle grew up attractive and passionate for the town, and her love of St. Elmo was fierce. After the death of her mother, Annabelle and Tony inherited the hotel, and the once impeccably clean establishment fell to shambles. So along with the decline of the town, Annabelle began to lose her grasp on reality. The town soon called her Dirty Annie because she would emerge in filthy clothing and her hair was in a tangled mess all the time. Finally, free of the harsh rule of her mother, most people assumed this was her quiet rebellion. Residents remember strolling the main street with her firearm loaded and hung over one shoulder, ready to protect the town from anyone who dared to threaten it. Since her death, it is told she can still be found roaming the streets. Only a short while after Annabelle had passed away, the hotel was left to a family friend whose grandchildren were playing inside the hotel, when suddenly all of the doors slammed shut and the temperature dropped 20 degrees. The children cried and screamed, and finally the room returned to the outside temperature, and the door slowly swung open. Oh, that's not the only ghost story. Don't worry. A woman skiing down Poplar Street at dusk was struck by a peculiar sight of a lovely-looking woman in a long white gown glaring out of the second-story window of the Home Comfort Hotel. Now, the skier was shocked. She knew the owner of the hotel was on vacation, and nobody was supposed to be inside. As she turned to see what the woman was eyeing, she noticed snowmobiles approaching. So, sidebar, snowmobiling is illegal in St. Elmo. So the skier went and advised the group, who promptly apologized and went back where they came from. When she turned back to look at the hotel, the woman in the window was still watching, and she lowered her head, nodded at the skier, turned and vanished before her eyes. So curious and in disbelief, the skier went back the next day to find every window and door were locked. When the owner of the hotel returned, the two women searched the property with nothing to be found. So was it Annabelle keeping watch? Be sure to let me know in the comments what you think.
Number 4 on this list is Gukujima, Japan. Being 480 meters in length and 160 meters wide, this small island holds a lot of history and ghost stories. Just 15 kilometers from Nagasaki and in front of the Japanese coastline. In the late 1950s, the island had a population of over 5,200 people. The people that resided in the Gukujima Island were mostly coal miners and their families. Since the island is so small at its peak in population, it was once the most densely populated place on the planet, 9 times the population density of Tokyo. Now the island is left completely abandoned and is effectively crumbling to pieces. The coal mining facility was previously called Battleship Island because its buildings and seawall make it resemble a warship. As for the island's fate, it was abandoned in the 1970s when petroleum fuels made coal obsolete. But abandoned does not mean empty, because the ghosts of the past have taken over the island and its buildings. The buildings were built by Korean and Chinese prisoners who were forced to work here from 1930 to just after World War II. The conditions of these forced laborers were hard, and some never made it back home. The people who worked here named the island Jail Island, or even Hell Island. After the war, the Japanese came to the island to work here themselves. In 1974, the mines started to run out of coal and people left the island. Soon, the island's uninhabited parts were reclaimed by nature. The weather conditions started affecting the concrete and buildings started falling apart. Sometimes people camped out here, but that was a very dangerous thing to do. The government wanted to discourage people from going over on their own and therefore decided to make it open to the public. Even though tourists are allowed to visit the island today, the echoes of the past still linger here, especially in the minds of the relatives of those forced laborers that have been forced to work here and inside the crumbling buildings. Fishermen who sail near the island claim they have seen strange flickering lights in the buildings, even though the island has no electricity. Strange noises have been heard and cold spots have been felt. People say they had the sensation of being watched, and there are some claims of people that have been touched by unseen hands. Nowadays, people who have visited say the decaying settlement contains so many items from the 70s that it almost looks as if people still live there. Day trippers beware, though, as exploring Hashima takes organization and many of the building structures are dangerously unstable.
Kicking us off in 5th place, we have water park troubles. This tale takes place at Schlitterbahn, which is a theme park owned by Cedar Fair in Texas on the Raging Rapids portion of the Lazy River. Our narrator Vanessa and her friends didn't expect anything intense from the ride. They were all just, looking forward to relaxing, watching the water go by, enjoying the scenery. As expected, the ride wasn't super intense whatsoever at first, until it hit a patch of white water, and because of the angle that the raft hit the bump, Vanessa and her companions were launched into the river. Nope, that's not supposed to be part of the ride. And while the ride might have only been, 3 feet or so deep of water, I'm reminded of all the posters from my local pool growing up about how people can literally drown in a bathtub. So yikes. Vanessa described herself as entering a state of shock, feeling emotions ranging from fright to embarrassment, confusion, and panic. As she attempted to reach for the raft to pull herself back in, she realized she couldn't see her friends anywhere, and she was once again being yanked underwater. Panic had taken over as the main emotion by this point, and Vanessa found herself swirling around and around and around under the water. Thankfully, a nearby lifeguard jumped into action and was able to hoist Vanessa and her friends back into their raft, allowing them to enjoy the rest of the rapids in the intended fashion. I'm a little concerned about the lack of seatbelts on that ride since they were never mentioned, and I feel like that should be a thing, or like a weight sensor to stop the ride in event that, someone goes over. Oh, just me, okay. As a high point to this, somehow Vanessa managed to keep her glasses on throughout the entire ordeal. Go Vanessa! In fourth place, we have an urban legend from Canada's Wonderland. Time to move on to a Cedar Fair park that's a little closer to home. As someone who spends most of September through December at Canada's Wonderland every year, I just knew I had to include this ghost story in today's list. While Wonderland might be home to the scariest of scary monsters every October, the iconic Wonder Mountain is actually home to a ghostly spirit all year round. Construction of the iconic theme park happened between 1979 until 1981, with construction of the mountain alone involving a dozen local companies under Cincinnati engineer Curtis D. Summers. Now, while we don't know the name of our victim, one of the construction workers who was working on Wonder Mountain passed on the job, and for the most part, the details of his passing and specifics have been kept pretty secret. I tried. I promise I tried. This ghostie haunts the mountain to this day, specifically the Thunder Run ride. If the ride operators don't greet the area with good morning and good night at the beginning and the end of each operating day, the ride will malfunction and cease operations until given the proper respect. Honestly, I'm all for inviting the ghost to roam the park during Halloween haunt. What's the worst that could happen? An actual ghost over in Ghostly Pines or Spirit Manor would be so much fun to see. Oh, just my own opinion again? Of course. Number 2, doomed before it could open. The Pripyat amusement park was set to have its grand opening on May 1st of 1986, in time for the May Day celebrations, but these plans were cancelled on April 26th when the Chernobyl disaster occurred, just a couple of kilometers away. Several sources report that the park was opened for a short time on April 27th before the announcement to evacuate the city was made to distract, residents from the unfolding disaster nearby. Constructed under the Soviet Union as a park of culture and rest, typical of many large cities in the, then Soviet Union, the amusement park's attractions were manufactured by the Yeskik-based firm Attraction, who were responsible for the construction of many of the amusement parks which remain to be seen around the former Soviet Union today in various states of repair. Located northwest to the Palace of Culture in the center of Pripyat, the park had 5 attractions. The iconic 26-meter Ferris wheel titled Circular Overview, Autodrome bumper cars, a paratrooper ride called Chamomile, Russian swing boats, and also a carnival Pew Pew game. Fun fact, the successor to the original company is still manufacturing the Ferris wheel, paratrooper, and bumper cars to the similar designs as of 2017. Radiation levels around the park kind of vary though. The liquidators washed radiation into the soil after the helicopters carrying radioactive materials used the grounds as a landing strip, so concrete areas are less radioactive. However, areas where moss has built up can emit levels amongst the highest levels of radiation in the whole of Pripyat. So the Ferris wheel actually made news in September of 2017 when Polish tourists turned it mechanically for the first time since 1986. Thankfully, they returned it back to its original position, but kind of neat that it could still work. Number 1, a cursed history. Lake Shawnee Amusement Park opened its doors in 1926 when proprietor Conley Snidow Sr. purchased the land. His vision to build a place for local families to relax and enjoy time together was realized as the coal miners from local towns descended on it each year, making it a fantastic destination for summer vacations. The park was full of activities. It featured a man-made swimming lake, a racetrack, concessions, and cabins for visitors, looking for an overnight stay. The big cornerstones were the Ferris wheel and the swings, 2 rides that were popular with everyone who spent time at the park. And you know what? That all sounds pretty idyllic to me. Tragedy, though, began to grip the amusement park in the 1950s, when several deaths shocked locals. A young girl's life ended on the swing ride when a delivery truck backed into her seat, killing her in place. Another youngster lost his life when he drowned in the swimming pool after his arm got stuck in a drain pipe. And by 1966, this amusement park closed its doors to the public, and the land sat dormant for decades. In the 1980s, the park again welcomed visitors when Gaylord White acquired the land and set out to restore it to its former glory. In addition to purchasing a Ferris wheel, he found a swing ride that seemed just like the swings that once thrilled guests. Now, Fun fact, when they installed the swings on the property, they realized the swings weren't just similar, they were the exact same swings from years prior, something that they decided to advertise during the grand reopening. The Lake Shawnee Amusement Park welcomed tens of thousands of visitors during its second run, which ran for just 3 years in the 1980s. Unfortunately, high insurance prices forced the White family to close their doors for the second and final time after those couple of short seasons, forcing them to pivot to other activities to keep the land active. They hosted fishing tournaments in what used to be the swimming lake, and they planned to create a space on the property for mud bogging, a motorsport the family knew would draw crowds to watch. While excavating a mud bogging track, the White family made a series of surprising discoveries that added depth to the property's history. For starters, the part was built over a Native American burial ground, with an archaeological dig uncovering 13 bodies, mostly young folks. In the 1700s, the property was the active home base for the Native Americans until they seemed to suddenly disappear. Among the bracelets, clothing, and tools that excavators found, they also found mass graves that suggested as many as 30,000 people had been buried on the property. But, that's not the darkest history of the land. In 1783, Mitchell Clay was the first European settler to make a home in the area, which was heavily inhabited by the Shawnee Native American tribe. So while Clay was gone to town one day, the Shawnees surrounded 3 of the Clay descendants who were working in the fields. Bartley met his end first, and Tabitha, hearing the explosion, ran to her brother, where she was attacked and cut by a stabby implement. Her body was dismembered, and both of their scalps were taken by the entire group. Their brother Ezekiel was captured and burned at the stake. A historical marker on the road leading to the park commemorates their memories. One could wonder if the tragic history of the grounds is the reason for the 6 deaths that occurred at the park, eventually leading to it being closed down in 1966. And many locals, including the park's new owner, claim the park to still be haunted.